And now it is time to get to Latin America. That is, we love Latin America for the football. Okay. Yeah, the way you play, that is you innovate, right? So we just want to see like what is there from Latin America in store for A plus compassion. And stage is all yours, Marcus.
Yeah. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Super excited. It's just such a wonderful event. First and foremost, I'd like to thank the Singularity crew, Darlene Dam, who I've known for over almost 10 years now. And it's good to see you, Patrick. And I know there's other SU alum in here that I haven't met before, but this wouldn't have came to fruition without Darlene introducing me to June, as well as Chris. And I just want to say thank you guys for the wonderful work that you guys are doing. AI and compassion is something that is definitely deep to my heart. And I look forward to having a wonderful, wonderful session today from Latin America. And, what a wonderful initiative to be a part of. I think before we get started, what I want to do is I want to invite everyone to kind of just have a gentle arrival here into this space, because we want to create a container that's really worth having when we're talking about these deep thoughts and these deep intellectual things, but we also want to come from a heartfelt center. So what I want to do is I want to invite everyone to just, wherever you are, whether you're sitting in a room, you're on a screen, or holding this moment from anywhere across the world, I want you to allow yourself to pause, really take one deep breath in and one long exhale out. So we can start now. Now let's take 3 collective breaths, each one with an intention. The first breath is for harmony within ourselves. The second breath is for the harmony within another in the global gathering. And then the third breath is for the harmony with Earth that sustains us. So let's take a moment to take those 3 deep breaths. That's wonderful, wonderful. As you come back, the third thing that I want to do is have a space for reflection, right? And as June has talked about, and a lot of speakers have talked about already through this conference, is the concepts of the ma, right? So in Japanese aesthetics, there's a concept of ma, the vital space between things, right? The pause that gives meaning. And it kind of gives me this ideology or this analogy with a symphony, where it's not the actual notes, but it's the space in between the notes that actually makes the harmony. And so I invite you now to really close your eyes or soften your gaze and rest in a moment of silence. And in this silence, notice what arises. Is it gratitude? Is it curiosity? Is it a question, or simply just presence? So I want to hold this for about 15 to 20 seconds and really think about that concept of space. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Wow, that felt good. I felt like my nervous system is kind of relaxed a little bit. So, with that, as we begin this Latin American segment, I really want to carry this stillness with us throughout our segment. Latin America has endured and created, resisted and reimagined. And today, what we want to do is gather to honor that resiliency and creativity. And so, may our dialogue today be guided by compassion, by ancestral intelligence and ancestral wisdom, and by the possibility of futures where technology serves not only as progress, but connection, compassion, care, and flourishing. And so, with that, I want to introduce myself a little bit. And so, welcome to the Latin American segment of AI and Compassion Global Forum. It's an honor to be here with you all as we highlight this region that is very close to me, but also serves as a reservoir for ancestral wisdom and a frontier of technological innovation. And this is innovation from the ancestral aspect of things, but also from the innovation of the modern technology aspect. And so this global forum is rooted in timeless principles. We talked about one is the wall, the principle of harmony and peaceful unity, where diverse elements come together in balance. And so today our dialogue is going to embody that harmony, voices of indigenous governance, inclusive leadership, regenerative design, and creativity joining us today. And another guiding principle is Ma, right? That vital space between elements that we talked about in our opening. And so as we explore AI and compassion today, let us hold that space, for listening deeply, for honoring what is unsaid, right? And for imagining what could be. As a cyborg anthropologist, my focus is on understanding the evolving relationship between humans and machines and how technology becomes part of our identities, how our cultures, and even our sense of meaning. It's not just about the tools we create, right? But about how we use those tools and how they shape our society and shape us as individuals in return. And so this is why the theme of AI plus compassion is so important to me personally, but I know that it's important to the speakers that you'll hear from the Latin America segment. And so in a world where AI is rapidly advancing, where we have a choice, right? We have this choice to either build systems that replicate extraction and kind of do it the old model, the old way, of inequity, or we have a chance to design technologies that expand empathy, right? That expand connection and expand human flourishing. And so compassion is not just a value, it is a design principle. And it should be integrated in everything that we do when we're talking about developing these systems. I work and started and co-created a company by the name of ISM that works where we design AI tools that's rooted in ancestral intelligence, also in cultural fluency, because we believe that technology at its best should honor both people as well as planet. And so this segment is about exploring Latin America can not only participate in the global AI transformation, but also lead it, right? Grounding innovation and compassion, inclusion, and ecological stewardship. If you look at, when we talk about just the anatomy of the earth, the Amazon is considered a lung, right? Along with the Congo rainforest. Those are the lungs of the earth, right? That's where the biodiversity actually thrives. And so we can learn a lot from the earth as a technology. If you think about technology, one of the ones that we are most intimate with is the earth itself, right? It's taken billions and billions of years to iterate, to have the perfect conditions for humans to actually be here. And so if you think about that, we think about all of the things that have to simultaneously go right in this technological system in order for us to have this consciousness to be here with one another. So together, let us step into this dialogue as an act of harmony, as a moment of reflection, and a commitment to creating this. So just a regional framing, right? So Latin America has long lived at the crossroads of beauty and struggle. It has endured the weight of extractive economies and inequitable systems, also climate instability. Yet it continues to radiate resilience, creativity, as well as regeneration. And so, what makes this region extraordinary is the way ancestral wisdom has been carried forward, all right, through stories that shape identity, languages that encode ecological knowledge, and governance systems that preserve balance between people as well as the land. So these are not remnants of the past, but living systems of intelligence that offer guidance for the future. And at the same time, Latin America is engaging dynamically with modern technology. And that scopes from artificial intelligence, blockchain to immersive design, urban innovation, new ecological cities, and is also experimenting with ways to reshape economies, redefine participation, as well as craft inclusive futures. So the power of Latin America really lies in its ability to weave these strands together, this ancestral wisdom with this technological innovation, as well as this social imagination, right? And so this is not only a regional story, but a global gift. And so what we want to do today with today's speakers is embody this balance of legacy and possibility, showing us how Latin America can serve as a compass of compassionality, right? And then the future ready technologies that both honor people and planet, as I mentioned before. So let's dive in. And the first person that I would like to introduce is a dear friend of mine, a co-worker of mine, and really a superhero in my eyes. I mean, you look up and this guy is just everywhere, just doing great work. Really leading the aspects of complexity as well as artificial intelligence, and is just a deeply rooted, embodied individual, right? And so he's also embodied the integration of rights, culture, as well as technology. So WarīNkwī Flores is a first generation Kara and Kichwa Nation scholar, an ancestral land trustee of the Chichupampa clan, Kutakachi Pueblo, and the founder of Kinray Hub. Their work is rooted in indigenous biocomplexity systems, designing rights-based frameworks that really reimagine sovereignty, resilience, and the infrastructures of knowing, deciding, as well as thriving. Wari's research and practice explore how indigenous governance can inform not only communities, but also the emerging architectures of artificial intelligence and global digital infrastructures. Together, we recently co-authored the paper Indigenous-Led Bioculture Engineering, Planetary Stewardship in the Age of Complexity for Wiley Complexity Journal, where we really focused and advanced the scholarship at the intersection of indigenous governance, complexity science, and technological futures. That work is already shaping conversations about how ancestral protocols can guide AI governance, ecological stewardship, and regenerative design. So in this keynote, Warī will share insights on how indigenous biocomplexity and AI sovereignty can serve as protocols for a regenerative future, one that really aligns technology with community culture and care. So please join me as we welcome our first speaker, WarīNkwī Flores.
Analamu, brother. It's good to see you, Marcus. Greetings to everybody from all the way here. I'm in the Tawantinsuyo, visiting Colombia for some regional meetings. Here we are in Colombia right now at the Fierce Global Biodiversity Week. So after COP16, there was the establishment of a whole week of biodiversity to come in and discuss policy, finance, and technology. So we are right here thinking about what is the future for Latin America as we enter into this next journey of meeting our different goals from different countries to meet the crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss, but also just the loss of human behavior. We are entering in a place where ethics, morality, kind of is in a blurry line. So we are trying to come back again and thinking about empathy, compassion, trust, relationship. So from all the way here, from the lessons that we learn in here, greetings to all of you. Allow me to share a little bit of the work that we do in Kinray. And I will try to just open the conversation. And I hope this is a conversation. If you have any questions that is not clear, please let me know. I will be happy to elaborate on those further rather than me just talking. From our work here from the Kara peoples of the Andes and the Quechua peoples of the Andes and the Amazon, we start seeing what is our role in the next era technological development. how we are to participate. And should we participate in a technology space where in many ways contradicts its own usability? So we have AI for nature, AI for good. But in the case of Latin America, there is two things that has happened already. So the very fast boom of technology like AI and the requirements of natural resources like precious minerals and also water for cooling and energy does exacerbate the natural resources exploitation of our territories in Latin America and the Caribbean. Explorations for precious metals is moving very fast in all our Amazonian and Andean countries. So how can a technology that's good for all or good for the earth can balance this need? There is a requirement. The bigger this technology becomes, the more we need these resources to run it. So that, right there is a dilemma of compassion, ethics, and morality, or moral ecology, as we call it here in our territories. Then there is the second part. The second part that we are quickly seeing, and right now this is in our lives, is affecting us directly, is AI in communication, or AI for good, for social good. So right now, Ecuador is undergoing national strike. So there is a lot of AI generated misinformation and disinformation of what is actually happening in the national strike. Converting indigenous resistance, as Marcos has said, there has been a tremendous resistance in Latin America, and there we continue to resist. As indigenous peoples resist to protect these natural resources that we need to run this AI machinery, these technologies that we're developing, they have been now using AI being tagged as terrorists, as extremists. So you see, when I mean AI has a particular way of twisting one's reality. So we live in a way when AI right now, in a way that is becoming more and more a poetical approach of what AI can actually do, mostly in places like Latin America, where our AI machinery is primarily being housed in North America, in Asia, in parts of Europe, that they have developed these large language models like a regenerative AI that create massively amounts of this information. So a lot of information that we might be accessing is not necessarily centered in our realities, in our cultural realities. So that's something that we need to think about carefully. So how do we participate? So the way that we are thinking about this participation is, let's start by creating a baseline standard. And the way that we are approaching this is a baseline standards is a baseline human rights and rights of nature standard in the design system of AI machinery. And thinking about AI, AI is just one element of multiple little artifacts that could be. When we talk about AI, so often we refer to regenerative AI. We forget that there is other agent AI, small language, we have explanation AI, we have multiple other AIs that work not in the same fashion, but can do very similar things. But it works in smaller scales or medium-sized scales. So there is other technologies of AI that often we don't discuss it enough. We talk about generally about regenerative AI. So our approach through biocomplexity systems is bringing this standard, this basic standard of human rights and rights of nature, such that the models that we're designing are actually answering to the needs of the people and their realities in the ground, but at the same time is continuously evolving in order to meet nature's sustainability. Otherwise, we are seeing right now, I was just in Climate Week, we'll sit down when the United Nations developmental programs, and we were discussing the usability of AI, which we still do not know. Really, we do not know AI's usability. What I mean by this is that AI is very good in analyzing. We analyze large amounts of data, we create patterns, and we create predictions. But it's not very good yet in giving actions. So we're missing the part of actions, primarily in Latin America, where our data is not part of it. So to make that a reality, we are working heavily in that region and here to build an indigenous data sovereignty. And when I say indigenous, I will invite you to think about most as a starting point, to think about data sovereignty as a whole and data governance as a whole. In order for us, when we use this AI machinery, we are bringing metadata that has provenance and that has permanence to the territory and is aligned with the baseline standards of rights. If we do this, I believe that our conversation will no longer be about AI for good or AI for AI plus compassion, AI for earth, AI for nature. It's gonna be AI that's actually doing how it was designed to be, an instrument, a tool that needs to be guided, carefully to do. Otherwise, we will end up with what's happening right now in Latin America. And I believe this will happen in other countries too, when national strikes, when people, social unrest, right now, the economical development between these technologies and what's happening in the ground is so wide, it's so widespread that the actual financial benefit to the countries of the communities, economical benefit sharing is not being seen. So in New York Climate Week, we talk about all these AI technologies to be used outside the sphere of what is happening in reality. So that, I believe, is where compassion comes in. How do we anchor in a place of reality? We need true data to better understand what actions can AI do, and then develop systems that actually can provide the evolution of AI continuously. It has to be an iteration of AI. So I don't talk about AI ethics because there is too many frameworks since 2019 until 2024. It has been developing from private sectors, from NGOs, many AI ethics frameworks. But what we're facing is that we are not operationalizing. We are not operating those in our work, in our approach. So that's where we are right now in the conundrum of discussing this paradigm. Is the AI doing what it was built to do to support humanity to survive? Or is the AI actually going to harm humanity? What I mean by this is economical incentives to incorporate AI into enterprises and the private sectors are so big, so big, so big. Tax breaks, incentives, and so forth to industrialize, to automatize. When you turn away and you look at what is the incentives for people in these factories, in these spaces to be trained when the skills needed to maintain the supply chain resilient, you have to go through a maze of bureaucratic work. So that is where the harm, we will start seeing the harm in industrialization and automation. So we are seeing this very from a design approach, from a systems evolution point of view, and from a very fundamental human rights and rights of nature approach. I know that rights of nature, it sounds very philosophical, and I know that many in the sector, in the digital sector, in the impact investment, in the incubators, and the accelerators, they don't want to hear it. Because this is just ideology. It's just some hippies, some indigenous folks running around in the mountains, crawling around in the forest. It's just this nonsense. It's a nonsense to think about rights of nature. That's how they think. That's how they say to us. It's just an ideology. This is never going to be practical. But then I look and I say, like, what will be the value? How much are you willing to pay for increasing your number of days out there, outside your office? Every time you take these big vacations to go and spend all the money that you make, how many of those days do you want to enjoy outside? Outside in the beach, outside climbing a mountain, outside having a party? Because that is where the reality we're looking at. Number of outdoor days that we can enjoy. It's not about philosophical, it's not about ideology, it's about a true reality. Climate models right now, to me, at best, are predicting 75% accuracy at best. The reason is because the climate model that we have, it comes from one part of the planet, not from all. We're using climate models that come primarily from industrialized countries that are utilizing their towers. In the global south, Latin America don't have the water towers. So our data is at best a proxy. So to me, it's more so in this compassion is, are we willing to risk the number of outdoor days that we enjoy? But I mean by this, is food security, is water security, is air security, energy security, because there's going to be a moment where we fight between running AI and having air conditioner, because some of our regions is going to be very, very hot. Some of our regions is going to be very, very cold. Some of our regions is going to be very, very dry. Some of our regions is going to be very, very wet. And we will start fighting for energy. That is how we're looking at this in order to make something that is not about argumentative about which model is better, but rather a model that is continuously in evolution with a very fundamental design approach that it can bring everything that we discuss in the notion of AI for good, AI for society, and AI for the good of the planet. Thank you, Marcus. It's great to be here with all of you.
I love that. I love that. Thank you, Warī. Really, really, really appreciate it. Before we let you go, I'd love to see if there are any questions. If there are any questions, put them in the chat next to us, and let's definitely have a conversation. That was really wonderful. Thank you, Warī. As you were speaking, I love that concept of number of outdoor days, we want to enjoy. And I mean, that really actually puts a practical aspect on what we're developing, what are we willing to give up in order to actually not approach, the aspects of what we're actually developing. I guess, from on the ground, what is the different ideologies of how we want to approach technology, let's say from an indigenous perspective to what you may see at a Western perspective? What are the clashes, and what are the bottlenecks, and what are some of the things that aren't aligning when it comes to those ideologies?
Okay, let me put it this way, that is not aligning. Because we have created a sensationalism. Sorry, that word is too long. But we have created too much expectation in technology, too much. And we have created a very poetical silver bullet that technology will solve our human being issues. The ideologies in there that it comes into crashing between these two perspectives or worldviews is the following. Relationship. We are built in relationship. No matter where you sit in this planet and what you do, you know that you like relationships. We build relationships with partners, with families, with community. Relationships builds trust. I trust in the system that I'm living in. I trust that the financial system will respond to my needs. I trust that the legal system will build us. So our economical system is imaginary. It's built on the trust and the relationship that we build in our goods, the services. Our technology is also building trust and relationship that we build that the technology will do no harm. And then our policies, for crying aloud, our policies are building the trust that society will actually look at them. And in those trust relationship, it comes culture. Just to finish, because my Wi-Fi is poorly. And also at the same time, I want to answer a question in the Q&A that asked about how can AI evaluate the value of indigenous culture. That's where we also crash value, the value systems. And there is two ways of thinking about value. One is fundamental values, our moral and our ethical approach. We see something that has no economical value. Like for indigenous cultures and many communities, farmers, water has no value, meaning has no money that can compensate for healthy water, healthy soil, or an ecosystem in which they can live. So quantifying the value is very, very difficult to do. And for many cultures, it has a personhood. It has legal personhoods. So that creates a major problem in valuing something. However, we could have a question of value from how different cultures something differently. And in that sense, it's not about evaluating cultures, but it's more so about thinking about what are the elements that we can utilize from technology and the encounter. This is the encounter. How we create new treaties, new encounter treaties to interact, to collaborate, to participate. When we do this, is where actually cultures benefit. Indigenous cultures can benefit from these encounters. Outside cultures can benefit from these encounters. So in many ways, compassion in many forms, it doesn't bring happiness. Compassion often brings a set of intentions that are good, but it lacks intention and purpose. It lacks a bilateral learning and two ways understanding of how we see the place where we live. So instead of in the pursuit of happiness, we should be looking in the pursuit of sufficiency, contentment. Many communities has sufficiency and contentment, and that's how they see their own existence. So it's very hard to measure somebody's happiness, in my understanding at the very least. But we could see somebody's contentment because the living conditions are improving. And we are creating the conditions for the improvement to be sustainable, to have resilience over time. So I will say more so thinking about when Marcos and my group, we talk about embassies. We need to create embassies to have an encounter era in order for us to have a clear dialogue of what is useful for a community and what will be useful for the technology development and the market that it serves. We are not having this embassy, this dialogue, this negotiation, this diplomacy. We are not having this diplomatical approach. We know we need to have that in order to really go beyond compassion, to go into a fundamental human rights and rights of nature, primarily when our worldviews see nature when personhood, somebody that has his own rights to exist. Those I match both of those questions with Marcos' questions. And I think, Patrick, you have your hand up before I left. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Yeah. I put a quick question in the chat, but I'm happy to ask it. Marcos?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, so I was just thinking, like, so I've had some done some work within Latin America, and have faced similar thoughts of how to do this the correct way. But I just kind of wanted to imagine, like, if you had the golden key or the golden lever to move the world in the way that you feel is best. So you're not trying to convince everybody else how to do it, you're doing it. What would you do?
That's a good question. Let me put it this way. What I will do is an embassy, a diplomatic embassy. We are lacking listening to each other. We lack so much of that. It's not that we are, I don't believe that this species of humans, this species of humans, part of nature, I don't think that we are inherently evil. I don't. And we don't think that. But we do think that we are not having a dialogue. We are not listening each other's worldviews. And therefore, when we come in, when one-sided approach, believing that this is the way that I want this to look like the planet, is one's understanding how the planet should look like. Instead of coming together in an embassy, in a diplomatical dialogue, they say like, okay, this is your worldview, that is my worldview. There is a complementary opposite design systems that we haven't get to it. What if we get to it? Let's come together and say like, I cannot stop you from developing technology. And you should not try to stop me to having a worldview that my nature has personhood. And I want to protect it because it's gonna have a benefit to the larger beings of this species called humans. And as you are thinking about how can I develop a technology that isn't the benefit for these large species called humans? See, both of us are looking to bring benefit for these larger species called humans. The difference is our worldviews, our relationship, and our trust to the elements that we believe to be real truth. Dialogue or embassy, a diplomatic mission is what we're missing. And if we do this, I believe that we can come back with evolutionary systems that we haven't told yet. And I think it's waiting for the moment to see the spark. And we are seeing it. If you think about it right now, we talk about AI plus compassion, right? Like we're thinking about like what is indigenous relationality or relational science and technology can help us inform design. So it very slowly we're bringing it. But if we were to have a golden key to unlock the doors of this embassy where we can come in from different perspectives and say like, okay, this is the driven goal. By 2100, we need to be in a place where we have plenty of water, plenty of food, plenty of this. How do we use technology to make us in that direction? Such that we enjoy outdoor days a lot more than what is happening right now. Every day is reducing the number of outdoor days. We need to increase that. We need to increase by 100-fold.
Thank you. Let's do it.
Let's do it. I'm right here. For everybody, we are right here. We are ready to sit down in an embassy or diplomatic dialogue and design.
Indeed. Warī, you have such a powerful voice and such important perspectives, and not only perspectives, but experience in this space. And I really urge everybody that's listening to this call or hears it at a later date to really reach out to Warī, because he is so grounded into this concept, and just his thought process and the way that he actually activates and operationalizes his work is very unique. And so please lean on him for actually making that change. You know, if we're talking about compassion, you know, really lean in and make it happen. The way that we look at what is possible and what we can do moving forward is something that he embodies. So Warī, I want to say thank you for joining us. And I definitely encourage your voice to continue to ring true around the world. Thank you.
I might have to drop because my Wi-Fi is not very strong right now. But please reach out anytime when any questions, when any approach, anything that was not clear. We are really always exploring ways that we can come together, create synergies, and create these embassies and start developing evolutionary systems. Thank you, and enjoy this approach from the Latin America, and greetings from the Cara and the Quichua peoples of the Andes and the Amazon across Abya. Thank you.
Thank you, Wari. What a wonderful talk. I really appreciate that. So as we advance the conversation, as we move from embassies and protocols, I want to introduce you all to another important voice coming out of Latin America. We actually met in Cali, Colombia last year where we were launching ISM. And so this is one of those voices that's really shaping the future on the ground in Latin America. And so Valeria Soler is a connector. She's a builder and leader working at the intersection of youth, women, and technology in Latin America. She has dedicated her career to really ensuring that the future of AI is not only innovative, but also inclusive and deeply human-centered. Valeria leads two groundbreaking initiatives in Colombia. One is Women in AI, where she helped launch the first South American chapter. And Young AI Leaders, Bogota, a UN-backed hub that empowers youth to really apply AI in advancing the Sustainable Development Goals. So through these platforms, she has created vital spaces for young people and women to not only enter the conversation around technology, but to lead it, bringing brilliant and fresh perspectives, really bold ideas and values that are really rooted in equity and care. Her work bridges policy, academia, and innovation, really connecting government leaders with deep tech startups, also with grassroots communities. She is also an artist, a podcaster, as well as a facilitator, weaving creativity into everything she does. And in her keynote, Valeria will highlight how Latin American youth and women are shaping compassionate ways of moving forward in AI. And this will ensure that the next wave of innovation reflects not only technical excellence, but also social responsibility, empathy, and justice. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Valeria Soler.
Wow, Marcus, what a wonderful introduction. I'm moved. Thank you for your kind words. It helps to put a little bit of perspective into what I do every day, because it's a little bit less intelligible than what you expressed, but it's spot on.
That's the complexity, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for inviting me to the space and for creating a Latin America segment on this important agenda. That doesn't happen that often in the international spaces that I've been in around technology. Usually Latin America is the last on the table, and if there's somebody, maybe it's just the one person, and it's like a really fringe perspective that barely gets any voice or recognition. So I'm trying to change that in any way that I can, and this is a step towards that. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen because I have a little presentation prepared. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we see it perfectly fine. You're good.
Okay. So actually, just before this, I was giving a talk in a public university outside of Bogota with high school students and university students. So it's right now extremely fresh within me to be around the youth, be part of the youth, really feel with it, and connecting with the territories and how that looks like in the ground. And I was so pleasantly surprised, honestly. So that presentation, we started off by doing an icebreaker, which was called Your Future, Your Prompt, whereby I asked participants, like, hey, if you could prompt an AI, to solve the greatest challenges of our country, what would you ask it to do? And this young man stood up and he, not only came to the front of the stage with me to talk, he gave a little, like, I don't know, crash course, and basically told us the biggest challenge we have in Colombia to adopting and scaling AI solutions, and it's our data, that we don't have a good like data room or data governance. We don't have the protocols. We really need to like kind of begin from scratch oftentimes. And this was like, I don't know, like a 17-year-old telling me this. And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And it really speaks about how the youth is approaching this. Because, there's this like, distance, because none of this is being created in your territory, but there's still, you're using it every day, you're consuming its content, you see it everywhere in social media. So there's this evolving notion of ownership and wanting to have leadership and a voice in these times of exponential change. We are really not naive at all as to like what's going on. And basically we're trying to find our place in it all. What can we do? Where can we innovate? How can we use AI for the betterment of society? And also, how can we do that while dealing with our mental health issues, with our addiction to the platforms? So this has been really connecting me towards a grander mission that I feel quite near to my heart, which has to do mainly with three things. The first one is to awaken collective imagination and agency, because here we tend to react to all the technological revolutions very, I don't know, like very reactionary. Like, oh, well, this happened. Now we need to like see what we can do about it and adapt. We're always falling behind. We're always, trying to play catch up game. And with AI, it's like, okay, so we all have access to this technology. We can see what Europe is doing, what the US is doing, what Asia, what Africa is doing. How can we propose something a little bit more different, a bit more grounded into our needs and into our vision, into our culture? And that's a part of like collective imagination. There's this topic of techno diversity that I've been fascinated with. And basically, Silicon Valley and the global north, they've been really good at not only creating these technologies and transporting them everywhere else around the world, but also in shaping the way we relate to technology and how we can imagine its future. And techno diversity speaks more of like, okay, no, but how did Chinese culture perceive technology before? What values did it shape? And maybe what have we left behind? Because our discourse has become so homogeneous that we're all starting to think the exact same. So sometimes you like open the space for Latin America to participate, and honestly, nothing really different or novel is shared, because we're trying to play also the imitation game. So getting like outside of the matrix of like what the rest of the world has been thinking and us wanting to propose something new is not that easy, because we see like there's like a model of like doing things and making that fit into the world. And then there's the part of agency, which is having the locus of power and realizing that you do have a say in how things happen and how things get done, that like you're not a victim of circumstance. And the third part is a dimension of purpose and responsibility to Earth's greatest challenges. So what I've noticed is that SDGs and in general like climate change and all these metrics that we use to measure the planetary well-being, they're really not doing well. And you have the brightest minds in, I don't know, Harvard and MIT and Cambridge and all these amazing universities, but the needle isn't moving fast enough. And not even COVID could move the needle significantly either. So I think, like Waki was saying, it's not only about the technology, it's also about the people. And I don't think there's enough people seriously taking on these planetary challenges. And based upon that, I have a hypothesis. So when you appropriate and like you take into your responsibility an issue of society, there's so many to pick from, it's really go and pick your own adventure. But selecting that and appropriating it gives you a sense of purpose, mission, and life vision, which is actually related to the anomic feeling that a lot of young people have right now, the sense of disconnection from their communities, isolation, and anxiety and depression. So I actually see a bridge to, connect with a greater sense of responsibility and purpose to bridge these like side effects and negative issues of how we've been relating to technology and our communities. Because I believe that deep down, we really do come to contribute to something greater than ourselves. And that's not a privilege. Like sometimes, you work and you are like, I just have to do this job. I need to pay these bills. Like, that's just what I got to do. But we're wasting so much human capital, so much intelligence, and so much energy on things that are not very consequential to our perpetuation of existence on this planet. So in today's talk, my message was like, guys, we need to stop wasting time and realize that it's our moment. It's our moment to take action, to take responsibility, and to contribute to something greater for problems we didn't really create or are responsible for, but we will be dealing with the consequences, and no one wants that. And I do all of this. Same as with women in AI, I'm a woman and young, and I feel like I really had to fight a bit for my place in the world and to be taken seriously. So women in AI kind of helped me to gain that confidence and that space in the field here in Colombia. And also the Young AI Leaders Initiative, it's because I am young, I'm Gen Z, and I know that being young in this day and age really isn't easy. Some statistics for Latin America that I'm quite concerned about is that 15% of our youth, ages 10 to 19, live with a diagnosed mental disorder. That's about 16 million young people. There's more than 10 daily suicides among adolescents. And this combines to a lost economic contribution of $30.6 billion a year. So in us dealing with the challenges of this future that is so uncertain, job displacement, you really don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. The greatest cure for me has been community, to understand that I'm not going through those anxieties alone, and that talking about it and gathering others around these issues can be extremely helpful in getting back that locus of power into ourselves. So Women in AI is an international organization with presence in more than 150 countries. And I met the global ambassador at AI for Good last year. And she was telling me like, yeah, we're in 150 countries. And I'm like, oh, well, that's a lot of countries. Like that's really a significant number of countries. They must have a chapter in Colombia. And surprisingly, they didn't. And actually, they didn't have a chapter anywhere else in South America. So that really showed me like this, how Latin America is in the global AI development sphere. Like we're really the last ones on the table. So for me, opening the chapter was like a no-brainer because like, okay, no, we really should have one. I know plenty of women in AI. I mean, this makes sense. And today we're more than 4,000 women around Colombia with local chapters in Antioquia, Norte de Santander, Bucaramanga, and the Coffee region. And later on came an initiative by AI for Good from ITU, which is the Young AI Leaders Program. So the Young AI Leaders Program in Bogota, you have a team of 13 young people from very diverse backgrounds. We have a team of like 5 mentors, and among those will be Pico, who will be speaking after me. And we are a community that's interconnected globally. We're 103 hubs in more than 50 countries. And I thought it's fascinating that this segment is focused on Latin America because I've been very focused on Latin America with this community. We even created a coalition. We also included the San Francisco hub because it's a strategic and the hub leader is Argentinian. But every day I talk with the Mexico City hub leader, Buenos Aires, Mérida, San Francisco, and we're all working together to see how we can open up opportunities for our region. Because, you know, this is the only like regional coalition that exists for this Young AI Leaders program. And it's because we really understand the urgency in creating opportunities for our region. We understand that we're the last ones to the table, we're comparing ourselves to the rest of the world, and we're not feeling good about what we're seeing. So there's like literally like fire under our ass to like move, to get opportunities, to hustle. So you will see us in that group as one of the most active participants. And for us, we understand the opportunity and the risk because AI is definitely the greatest transformation opportunity of our generation and potentially the next 3 ones to come. Because we can see its potential to solve real problems. I think we're still bridging on like how it was mentioned previously to actually see the outcomes of that. And with the Young AI Leaders Initiative being kind of place-based, it forces you to solve local, but to think global. Because when you solve local, you're close to the issues, you're close to the stakeholders, you're close to the problem. And when you think global, you understand that that issue is not isolated to your region, to only your region. The solution that you derive from it could be escalated and tested around the world as well. And there's certain risks and certain things that are affecting or that we're really questioning ourselves with. And it's one of the reasons I feel like we had a good chemistry with Marquez, because I never thought that my 2 years in high school of going deep into anthropology would be relevant in the field of technology. And guess what? I was wrong. It's been extremely useful and it's super key. And one of those ways that it's become really relevant to have that background in the social sciences is to understand the power dimension of this, to understand how this is affecting the social fabric, how it's affecting the way we relate to each other and to ourselves. And there's this word that I recently learned in AI for Good, which was enmeshment of AI and your emotional, like using AI as an emotional therapist. And it's like, wow, we're letting this like LLM tell us what to do and what to think and how to deal with our issues when it's literally a prediction of words and we take it at face value. And it's affecting how we feel in our own lives, in our own personal relationships, in our own moments of solitude. So there's a lot of things that are going on. And it's important to understand that dimension of that it's like place-based. And before I move on to this one, there's this book that I'm reading right now. It's called Creating from Here. And it talks about one of the most important startups in Latin America, which is Platzi. And basically, the book is like, okay, we might not be the biggest startup out there, but we've had relative levels of success in the region, and we're staying in the region. So they compare how creating startups and the philosophy and the recommendations and how to do it well mostly comes from a US context and not a Colombian context. Even how you hire, how you communicate, how do you deal with culture and problems. And it's very much advocating to, instead of seeing creating from here as a limiting factor, seeing it as an opportunity for novelty, for nuance, for a differentiated value proposition. And I think that's so interesting because, you know, we're all getting told like how to do things right, but from the same type of like context. but when you actually go into the ground, there's so much difference to understand. And probably the biggest learnings that I've had so far has been related to community building. So this is a picture where we have the San Francisco hub leader, Vienna, Doha, Mexico City, Munich, and we all are in like this like weird bubble of youth having different religions, different cultures, different worldviews, but we all get the message that AI should be used for the betterment of humanity. Even if when you talk about AI for good, no one really knows what good is, what good means. And humanity, I feel like we're all trying to understand what good looks like. So is it like do no harm? Is it having ethical frameworks? Is it having, I don't know, like a philosophical questions about how this works? We don't really know, but we're exploring that question. And it's like an open question invitation for everyone to participate and build that answer together. And the second one has been Women in AI Colombia, because in our culture, or I don't know, I think it's also around the world, engineering and STEM fields are dominated by men, especially. So me having come from a social science background, but having fallen in love with technology, I felt for the longest time the biggest imposter syndrome, because I was like, no, well, I'm not an engineer, so I don't really have an informed opinion on the subject. But the deeper I got into it, I thought that that's not actually real. But there's like this dimension of like, is my voice valid? Should I actually speak up? Should I share what I think? And my conclusion so far is that yes, and that's been incredibly transformative. But for a lot of youth, we don't feel that. They don't really feel that their voice counts, or that their voice matters, or that they're competent enough to speak up. So I'm trying to like get and empower young people and women to take a stance, to speak up. You might say something that isn't the smartest thing in the room, but your voice matters and needs to be in the conversation. So for Latin America, we basically need four things. We need like good STEM and AI education, which startups like WarīNkwī are offering. We need some more like support on like mental health and well-being programs, because any school that you talk to, they'll tell you that that's their biggest challenge. And I feel that part of that issue is our relationship with social media. Thirdly is access to financial capital, entrepreneurship training. And lastly is having a digital infrastructure that is inclusive, because I'm from Bogota, and when you're in a big city and you're wealthy, it's pretty much like being anywhere else around the world. But once you get out of the main cities, it's really hard to be competitive at anything, to use internet for actually learning stuff and not get consumed by like Facebook and TikTok. And I feel that throughout my work with the young AI leaders and the LATAM coalition, I've really seen how resilient and how incredibly empowered and intelligent and creative they are to move forward. So this is basically what I'll keep doing for quite some time. And now I am open to any questions you guys have.
Thank you for that, Valeria. That's amazing. And like you bring up a really interesting point around mental health, right? And I guess if we're approaching the concept of compassion, like you have to actually be mentally capable and like aware to actually, feel compassion, for what you're building or the people around you. And as an anthropologist, like these are things that are part of the larger structures of a community, right? And so when you're evaluating how connected you are, to your individual self as well as to your community, you have to take these things into consideration. And so I guess just to start off the Q&A, and please, like, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A portion of the chat. But just to kind of start off on a question, I guess, with the youth that you are working with, what is it that they see mental health to be? And then also, like, what would be a way to approach or utilize AI tools in order to understand and to deliver better mental health spaces and or technology that can ultimately derive compassion?
Well, I think even before talking about mental health, the question of diversity is very, very important. So in our hub, we have all kinds of diversity, neurodiversity, and gender. And from that comes a lot of mental health concerns as well. So, and also like socioeconomic diversity. So basically, things of life that you're just different set of cards that you're dealt with, but that kind of is like the basis for which the playing field is played at. So for mental health, honestly, for us has been like the most important thing is isolation and addiction. Isolation from each other because we're addicted to social media platforms, to online communication. So probably the biggest impact that we've had so far on mental health is just getting together, making new friendships, meeting people outside of your bubble, and coming together for a shared purpose. That has been incredibly helpful for this like microcosm of humans in Bogota. But I think that holds the key for something bigger, because it's not like, oh, there's this tool, there's this agent that you plug in and you talk to it and it'll solve all your issues, right? No, it like takes a lot more work and it's a lot more demanding, and sometimes it's annoying because you got to respond to a lot of messages, so you got to show up to the meetings, you got to do some work. But my job is not to like make it easy, but to like make it meaningful. And in that meaningfulness and feeling that you have a purpose and an impact, a lot of these like mental health issues sort of like, I don't know, soothe or go on a second plane.
I love that. I love that. And I guess as a follow-up, what are some of the youth actually asking of their governments and their local leaders when it comes to, setting up the future, because the youth is very important in driving what comes next, right? And it seems like we're kind of at this cusp where we have the older generation driving the initial phases of the technology, but there's also youth that might look at this technology and utilizing it in a different way or approaching it in a different way. What are some of those conversations that you've been having, where the youth are actually talking to governments on what they want for the future?
Well, we don't normally have a seat at the table, to be honest. We kind of have to like make it ourselves and push it ourselves. And my personal experience with policymakers and law has been mostly because I was in the public sector. I worked at the Ministry of Technology and Communications, and there I was sort of close to AI governance and its international cooperation. But otherwise, you kind of have to make space for yourself. You're not automatically invited. With that being said, though, we have participated in some policy discussions with the Ministry of Science and with some senators. And basically, it's what's happening in schools now. The students, they understand the technology and they know how to use it super well. And the teachers are like trying to catch up and trying to understand how to do it, but they're like grappling at ends and it's all a mess. And it's like, oh, well, these kids are going so fast. What are we going to do? This is so complicated. We need to like, take it bit by bit, with tweezers. because this could get out of hand. They are way too powerful. So for us, it's like, oh my gosh, just get it already. This is important. And at the panel that I had with the Minister of Science, I'm telling them, like, guys, like regulating this technology is most definitely the most important activity of any democracy right now. Like, it's that important. But when I'm in those discussions, it feels quite shallow, the level of depth and nuance that they can have. And the focus on the next generation is not really there. Like, it's very, reactive. We're not thinking beyond the next year until the next president gets elected. But in like the future's thinking, it's like, no, we need to understand the next 10, 20, and 50 years and plan ahead for those. But we're not even there yet at all, not even close. So that's concerning.
I totally agree. And one of the things, just there's a lot going on in the world right now, when it comes to, just kind of the segregation of thought, how like everything is kind of almost dichotomous. It's like if you believe in this tribe, then you can't believe in that tribe. And there's not a lot of cross collaboration with a lot of thoughts and ideas. Also, you're seeing a lot of like more with social media, a lot of atrocities that are going on around the world, and through these things, I just wanted to kind of get your viewpoint when you come to compassion, how are youth actually looking at being compassionate for, people and youth around the world, like as they go through, different things, within the world, how is that actually fostered? And is there a way that, and I know that there are many chapters that you work with around the world, is there a way to like integrate that compassion into, local chapters that actually move the needle about like how do we actually become better people and better humanity, forward structures? When you're growing up in a world that's full of, wars or, people are going hungry and you're like seeing this constantly, is that something that motivates the youth to actually do something different? Or does that like discourage youth, to say like, hey, you know what, there's not any possibilities? Or how do we actually approach that and start to drive compassion by seeing these new ways of being, that are only open through technology?
I really love that question because I've been asking it myself quite frequently. Because what I've noticed here in the local ecosystem, and I completely understand and I think it's necessary, but the focus on AI has been mostly about economic well-being. How can you profit off of this? How can you get the next startup, the next business freeze? Can you hear me or did it freeze? Wait, you're muted.
It froze for a little bit, but keep going.
Okay. All right. So I actually got into like a little bit of an argument with one of the most important, like influential figures of the tech ecosystem this year, because he gave this talk where he was like, people shouldn't be afraid of AI. They just need to learn how to use it and apply it to their business and make as much money as they can off of it. And I wrote to him afterwards. I'm like, listen, I think there's plenty of things to be afraid of. And it's a little ingenious or dishonest to pretend that those fears are not valid or not relevant versus just talking about them openly and going and like actually responding to them in a significant way. So I think there's like a bigger like necessity of finding like abundance, economic stability, economic growth before you can actually begin to care about a greater sense of purpose, care about humanity as a whole. So it's a little bit like Maslow's pyramid. And again, like it makes total sense, but I am like one of the few voices in the ecosystem that is like, hey, guys, we need to think about this more deeply, more responsibly, ethically. What we should be using this for impact. We should be using this for climate change and SDGs, but I'm definitely not the, I don't know, dominant voice. Yeah, so it's not the dominant discourse for sure. I'm a little bit more fringe, but I'm trying to change that.
I love that. Valeria, thank you so much for not only the work you do, but how you show up and who you are individually. And it's so important because the youth, they definitely are the voice and the future and the energy for what comes next, you know. And as we develop these groups, you know, compassion is something that needs to be at the forefront, right? Because if we can't get that right, then ultimately I'm afraid that there's going to be a runoff to where we're actually just you know, copy and pasting all of the infallibilities and humanity onto a digital system. But not only that, but we're giving autonomy and direction to something that, you know, will control not only our social behavior, but our individual behavior. So I just want to say thank you for the work that you do. I look forward to collaborating with you and your groups in the future. And I really appreciate you showing up for this global forum.
Thank you, Marcus. I really appreciate you as well. And just one last thing, you know, with like youth inclusion at the table, it's really just about hustling and making your voice be heard. And one of the things that we recently accomplished was to get a space in a very exclusive agenda on AI safety and actually integrate the whole community. And I don't know, so if there's like influential voices here, really do keep it at the forefront that having that dimension of youth inclusion is incredibly powerful because you're also shaping and instilling that sense of purpose and responsibility onto the next generation. So I just want to leave that as a closing remark.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Valeria. Really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. You know, I love the way that this is going. You know, and as we move forward, I want to, you know, kind of put the piece blocks together, right? And so, you know, Wari opened us up with really understanding like data sovereignty and how to engage with a compassion for the biocomplexity within regions, right? And ultimately looking at how data is not only stored, but how it's utilized. And do we actually understand the capabilities of the technologies that we're designing? And then, you know, Valeria had this really nice, you know, overarching compass of what youth are looking for, and you know what innovation looks like to them, and what does mental health, and what does economic success, and you know what are the core bases that we need to actually set in place before we can, you know, continue to expand this out and have something that is actually meaningful when we are creating these things. And our third keynote, you know, takes us into the design of our future environments, you know, and so environments are definitely connected to our societal norms and how we actually utilize our spaces and how we live, how we connect, and how we build those spaces that really shape our societies. And so Pico Velasquez is an architect and a visionary who pioneers the concept of conscious cities. And this is like merging AI, data, immersive design to really create and co-create ecosystems of empowerment, right? Inclusion as well as sustainability. So as the founder and CEO of Vira, VIIRA, Pico leads groundbreaking projects that use digital twins, immersive technologies, blockchain, and innovative cultural and financial models to really reimagine urban life. Her work asks us to see cities not simply as built environments, but as living systems, spaces that can embody compassion, regeneration, care when designed with intention. So Pico's career has spanned some of the world's most influential projects, from shaping geometry at Google's headquarters to working with Cirque du Soleil and Hard Rock to create immersive experiences, to advising on the ambitions digital twin strategies that underpin Saudi Arabia's visionary master plans. So her insights have been shared on global stages such as COP28, South by Southwest, and the World Economic Forum, where she continues to champion the role of technology in building inclusive as well as regenerative futures. So in this keynote, Pico will help us imagine, also reimagine how cities themselves can become catalysts for human flourishing, ecosystems where technology does not alienate us from one another, but instead empowers connection, inclusion, and sustainability. It's been a pleasure to be introduced to Pico, and I look forward to actually, collaborating with her in the future. So without further ado, I want to welcome Pico Velasquez.
Thank you, Marquise, for the wonderful introduction and for having me here. I'm going to go ahead and just start sharing my screen to go through the presentation, but this is a heartfelt subject of mine, and I curated this presentation more specifically for this theme because I think it has like a beautiful intersection of technology and inspiration that that we can build upon. So let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah, we see it. Beautiful.
Cool. So I'm going to do like a quick note, which is that all the images in this presentation have been produced by several incredible artists. So if anyone wants to know the credits of each of the images, available upon request. So imagine a city that breathes, where technology listens to nature, communities thrive in respect and balance, where every AI decision, economic, cultural, environmental, is rooted in interconnectedness and harmony. This is a conscious city, built through phygital ecosystems, blending physical and digital layers, infrastructures that sense and respond in real time. This shift marks the beginning of a larger progression. Smart cities that collected data, analyzed data, responsive cities that adapted to human needs and environmental shifts, autonomous cities capable of self-regulating systems like energy, mobility, resources with minimal human intervention, to now conscious cities. Conscious cities are what I'm calling like the ultimate leap. They're self-sustaining, self-optimizing cities that think in ways parallel to biological organisms, designed not only for efficiency, but for harmony with humanity and the planet. In a conscious city, infrastructure like roads, utilities, and data systems function like mycelium networks, intelligently redistributing energy, water, goods, or information to where it needs most, balancing scarcity and abundance in real time. Cities can function like hives with decentralized decision-making, blockchain governance, and AI-enabled sensing, where every citizen contributes to the collective intelligence instead of being passive consumers. A conscious city designed as a human rainforest, diverse cultures, industries, and communities supporting one another, recycling energy and resources, regenerating rather than depleting. For centuries, we built cities that extracted from the land without giving back. We treated people as part of the machine rather than as living beings. And what has been the result? Consumerist economies that produce disposable products with little real value, designed for waste, not longevity. Land ownership systems that exclude communities, disempowering those closest to the land. Decision-making driven by and for few, where speed and profit overweigh equity, inclusion, and respect. And environmental neglect, with cities that pollute more than they restore, extracting, draining, and contaminating our resources, air, soil, and water. What have we been doing wrong? We've mistaken growth for evolution. Growth is focusing on quantity, versus evolution is thriving on quality and transformation. The good news is that we already have the seeds of change. With AI, blockchain, and other emerging technologies, we can build new systems that are regenerative instead of extractive. Systems of intelligence, powered by AI, allowing urban environments to sense, learn, adapt, and anticipate. The city collects data, traffic patterns, energy, usage, air quality, etc. It adapts to immediate needs, rerouting vehicles, adjusting streetlights, reallocating resources, systems begin to self-regulate, running transportation, energy, or waste management with minimal human oversight. And eventually, cities become living ecosystems that optimize not for efficiency or not for efficiency only, but aligning with the growth with human and ecological rhythms, minimizing emissions, protecting biodiversity, and functioning as living nodes in this planetary system. So how does this work? Self-sustaining, powered by renewable loops and regenerative infrastructure that restore more than they consume. These systems are also co-created, designed in partnership with the citizens, with the community, where AI and digital twins enable input, participatory governance, and collective decision-making. They're equitable, designing algorithms and resource flows that prioritize fairness, ensuring that opportunity, safety, and access are distributed inclusively. And planet-aligned, because it's not just about people. Growth is measured not in GDP or square footage, but in harmony with humanity and Earth's ecosystems. There's a lot of emerging projects that are happening right now that are already pointing towards this direction, and I'm going to name a few. So Atlas AI is a startup using satellite imagery and AI to map poverty and economic opportunities in underserved regions, enabling target aid distribution. It helps governments and NGOs in Africa and Asia allocate resources more equitably, reducing biases in development planning. Power Ledger, an Australian company enabling peer-to-peer renewable energy trading via blockchain. This allows households, especially in remote areas, to sell excess solar power. This democratizes clean energy access, reduces carbon emissions while promoting economical inclusion for off-grid communities. Arat, which is actually one of my startups, I'm going to present two of my startups very quickly here, is a non-extractive gold ETF. So it's an exchange-traded fund, tokenizing unmined gold reserves, meaning we don't take it out of the ground, to unlock liquidity and value without environmental destruction. It empowers landowners, governments, and communities in resource-rich regions by enabling equitable wealth distribution, global market access, and sovereign finance resilience. EOS, which is another one of my startups, is a decentralized AI network, a co-created intelligence built by and for all. So a little bit different from how the AIs that we're seeing right now that are very centralized and competing against each other. Here, it incentivizes user contribution and transparent token rewards. So essentially, we give everyone, part of the company for building the company, for building the data, for being part of this collective infrastructure of data. By incorporating the voices, data, and perspectives of all cultures, ethnicities, and communities, EOS nurtures a more holistic intelligence for an inclusive digital ecosystem. An example of part of this ecosystem, now that we're in the topic of Latin American indigenous culture, is indigenous wisdom. Indigenous communities have long understood what it means to live in respect for the land. Their principles of non-extraction, reciprocity, honoring life are the foundation of sustainability. So just imagine training on AI not only on Silicon Valley databases, but on the indigenous cultural heritage and knowledge. And you can imagine this being in every part of the world. So what is our vision? Conscious cities that thrive on respect, equity, and inclusion of the environment, animals, and its people, non-distraction, non-extraction, non-destruction. I have my American accent there, kind of can't tell the difference. Balanced ecosystems where every stakeholder, from the soil to the government and its citizens, thrive together. It'll require collective action, no doubt, from governments, business, communities, and individuals to shift away from the economies of waste that we currently have and towards these economies of trust, dignity, responsibility, and collaboration. But together with the wisdom of the past and the tools of the present, we can create a world that sustains life, but most importantly, that honors it. Thank you. I think I went really fast, but yes. And this is a bit about me for those that want to reach out or, in any collaboration, in a collaborative spirit or research spirit, I'm always happy to work along other people.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Would love to open up for a Q&A. You know, and that really, your talk really kind of got my mind moving when you're talking about indigenous and ancestral traditions. Um, and how, you know, indigenous wisdom has treated the earth not as an asset or, you know, to be extracted, but as a sacred vault of wealth, right? Holding value in ecosystems, biodiversity, waters, soils. And so in this sense, the earth is the original ledger, right? So I'd love for you to talk more about, you know, the aspect of, you know, when you talk about compassion, it's like, you know, you're compassionate about things that you give value to, right? And so when you're talking about the earth as a store of vault, or, you know, utilizing gold as an ETF, or like untapped resources, which the earth actually holds many of that. I would love for you to kind of just talk on that a little bit more, and how that connects to compassion when it comes to, you know, technology and what we could utilize that for.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that the easiest one, and that's the one we're starting with, is gold, just because non-extracted gold still holds the value of gold, right? So we can have, we're calling it like an in-ground gold index, so like an IGI. Essentially, it can be traded very similarly to gold right now. It's a one-on-one comparison, so that's kind of easy to choose. Do you want to go to one that's like sustainable, doesn't damage the planet, doesn't, you know, dislocate communities, but, you know, one that like really empowers the earth and the people, or the one that's, you know, doing all these destructive things and, you know, processes that are not really aligned with, you know, a more inclusive ecosystem. But when it comes to projects that aren't necessarily like that easy to evaluate, so we have projects of like land conservation, right? It's a little bit more difficult to say, like, how can we prove that conserving the land is more valuable than destroying it, right? Like, we have a project in the Amazon of 340,000 hectares for conservation. And you can imagine the amount of developers or even people that want to, you know, tear down this incredible land to turn it into like cow farms. It's just like the meat industry is like its own thing. Like, I'm vegan here, so like it's its own thing. Like, at the scale of 7 billion people, it's almost impossible to sustain. And because the value of the Amazon land is so cheap, then, you know, it's more profitable to tear it down, right? So one of the things that we've been working on with Arat is that we're starting with gold, which is the one that's like obviously more, you know, more like financially, you know, equivalent to what we know right now. But the idea is that we have to start thinking of value in a more holistic way. Value cannot just be financial value. There's ecological value, there's cultural value, there's historic value, right? There's all these things that if we consider the world as, you know, as what it is, an entire ecosystem, not just isolated fragments, all of this holds an important, you know, collective add, right? So if you destroy something here, it ends up coming back in another way, right? Because you either have to pay it in some way or another, right? And in a way, I think carbon credits are like a way of solving, but not really solving the core issue, but it's still an initiation of solving, right? It's like they're, you know, these companies, corporates are still destroying the planet somewhere else, but then they're buying the credits to compensate. Sure, that's like a transition, but eventually, you know, we want to get to the place where the value is actually being assessed through its long, like its entire lifespan and its effect on the planet, right? And with that, we're calling it rights. And with that, essentially, when you start trading these assets, whether you're trading conserved land or you're trading, you know, non-extractive gold, you're trading coffee or whatever it is, like these different assets that we're going to put on chain, you see not only the financial value of it, but also the ecological value, the cultural value, and all these different things, right? So we get a more like a more comprehensive understanding of what it is that we're trading. And I do believe that as, you know, as the planet wakes up, right? And I think that's like a word that is used a lot sometimes without much context, but there is an awakening. Like, I have felt it, a lot of people have felt it. We are all becoming more conscious, more connected to ourselves, to the world, to each other. All of this, yeah, like levels of consciousness is about it. Yes, all of these levels of consciousness. We realize that we cannot be destroying the outside without it affecting us directly. If you want to think of it from like a very egotistical standpoint, only about yourself, it does come back, right? But if you want to think about it from like a more holistic or like even more comprehensive, is that all of this experience is one single being, it's one single experience, right? So hurting something external is it's essentially just hurting yourself, right? So I think there's something here, whether it's through blockchain specifically, because you asked about that, of like, how do we assert value and how do we change the definition of value, that I think is very important. Yeah. And then like all the incredible things that blockchain brings, immutability, transparency, fractionalized ownership, the fact that, people can participate at multiple levels with $1, with $1 million, you can trade at any level, but essentially it becomes an open economy for everyone that wants to participate.
I
Yeah.
love that. Are there any questions from the panelists or any of the attendees? Raise your hand, or if not, I have a plenty of questions that we can get into. But feel free to actually type in, or ask your question. You can unmute yourself and ask your question as well. And I just to kind of continue the conversation, when you're talking about like the individual kind of reflective aspect that actually reflects out into the society, that you kind of have to have some self-awareness before you can actually affect change outwardly. What kinds of data do you think should a conscious city prioritize collecting, or avoid collecting for that matter, to kind of remain ethical and trustworthy or compassionate? What does that data set look like?
Yeah, I think when it comes to this is a sensitive subject, right? Because data sovereignty is a very, very crucial topic that we should all be very wary of, right? What data is yours versus what belongs to the city? The city is the government, or is it a decentralized city, right? Who owns this data? What is it using for? Could it be used for surveillance? Could we end up like in a very like dystopian situation where there's like a map out of who you are, in a way that can be used against you versus being used for you, right? So I think these topics right now, and I mean Palantir and all these companies are like going in like a not so great direction when it comes to this. So I think it has to be treated with a lot of delicacy. And that first point is data sovereignty, right? That every person has to own their own data. We currently don't. People are not even aware that they have data somehow. It's like there's like, where does your social media data go, your Gmail data go, like all the calls that you have, all the chats that you have, where does it go? Who uses it? Where has it been like in some way tagged to you, whether that's to train all these AI models, which it has been trained on all of our data, explicitly without even, without even our consent, because it's just being like, they're all in like legal wars right now, like scraping the internet, taking all the data, creating these models, right? But there's this need for us to, as individuals, to be able to own our own data. It's like, owning your body, owning your space, owning your digital identity, etc. And that's something that is also a part of EOS, one, the AI company that I'm working on. It's like the essential point. And I think there's a lot of people that are working on this as well, because it's a very pressing subject. But then that's where it comes to like, what information, what data is tagged specifically to you? Like, what is Marquis data? What is Pico data versus what is generalized data that can be used for the modeling of these cities, right? Because the problem is when it comes to be specific. I think being part of a data set that can inform a city at a large scale is important, right? You need to know how traffic moves. You need to know like if something is, if there's any types of like limitations that are happening, like how can, or challenges that need to be resolved, like data is great at being able to, give exact, information for that. But when it comes as like putting all the names as like, oh, who was in that protest, or, there's like fine limits, right? Like you do want to know who was the individual that crossed the red light or that, ran over a dog or a person, but like, but you don't want to know where they're at, what they spend, where they live, what their habits are, to such specificity that it can eventually become like a mass manipulation, right? Which unfortunately already happens in a lot of countries. We all know which ones, so no need to name them. But in a lot of other countries, including the US, are going through a process of even some of the latest like White House conversations were around data ownership of decentralized companies, right? So it is a very strict subject that I think the best way to resolve it is a combination of sovereignty and decentralization. It cannot belong to anyone. I mean, it belongs to the self, but when it comes to companies, it cannot belong to singular companies. It has to belong to a network and managed by a network, and there has to be different levels of management and and decision making as to like how that data is being used ethically. Yeah. It's a very long response.
That's brilliant. One of the things, and what's particular to the work that I do is, really understanding how do we incorporate and initiate indigenous protocols into AI, right? And that looks, something of understanding that there is temporal time, right? So we're talking about temporal sovereignty, where time is something that actually has, or even the rights to refuse, right? That a protocol will not be activated until like certain things happen, like whether it be a seasonal transition, whether it be, salmon actually coming back to farm. And so like these more indicators of what the earth is doing that will actually be validations for things moving forward. And so I guess, with that, how can cities integrate ancestral knowledge and kind of this cultural heritage into AI, that enables the design for future resiliency in cities?
Yeah. One of the things that I've been thinking with EOS as well is when it comes to decentralized AI, I'll explain a little bit more how this works. So essentially, each person or each company or each community holds a data set, right? Whether it's like their daily input or when it comes to a company, there's a lot of like financial marketing, like a lot of movement that happens, in at the different levels of the data sets, right? Or the different levels in which data is being aggregated. When it's fed into an AI, it's fed through a federated learning system, which means that it's taking on the learnings, but it's not tagging it to you, right? It's anonymized, but it tags you in the back end process to be able to then give you rewards for how it's being trained, in the sense that the quality of your data, it's not quantity of data, it's the quality of data, how much it improves the original model is going to give you a set of reward tokens, but also how many times your data has been used for the research, the search engine, etc., for others, right? So you'll be getting like, little snippets of like token rewards every time that something is used similarly. Because we enter into like these weighted pools of like, how these models or these LLMs are being created, right? So the concept is that, the indigenous community, whether it's the individual or the community itself, feeds the data to the LLM or like to the EOS system. The EOS system, puts it inside of like a specific vault that, it's not going to be, it's going to be protected, but it still tags it so that however it is being used, you're getting retributed for it, right? But then it creates like these layers of hierarchies of information so that instead of creating like everything being homogeneously, being, the information being like weighted homogeneously, it can also be tagged by groups to understand and to respect different cultures, different religions, different political perspectives, etc. I think the idea Valeria mentioned this a little bit too. Like we don't want to fall into the trap of becoming like a like a homogeneous system, right? Where like all the information is kind of guiding us in the same direction, and all of a sudden we all become the same, like bananas. It's like, no, that's not the point, right? That's not resilient at all, and it's also like not interesting to not have like a diverse world, right? So I see someone like laughing with an emoji, or is that you? But yeah, I think it's like, how do we create a system that helps everyone grow, have the flexibility to go in any direction that they want, but still able to maintain, whatever it is, the principles, values, heritage, whatever it is that they want to maintain as a culture, as an individual, right? I think that's also very important. I hope that answered the question. Oh, I can't hear you, Marquise.
So one last question before we let you go. This has been absolutely valuable, but in your perspective, what does a fully realized conscious city look like, say in 2050, right? And what role will AI play in sustaining? Mhm.
Yeah. I mentioned it quite a bit during the presentation, right? Of like what it means to have like a system that can regenerate itself, that can evaluate itself, that it's not just like processing data for optimization purposes or efficiency purposes, but that is adapting, based on its needs, its resources, like allocating things where it needs to. The more it is closer to natural systems, probably the most intelligent, if you think about it. Natural systems, from our DNA to mycelial networks to anything in nature, has millions, if not billions of years of evolution. So, they're farther up the line of like how they manage data themselves. Like everything is data if you want to, be able to tag it. But even the way that, proteins move inside of the system, or like, from nutrients, etc., like how organisms of cells work, are probably like, the most intelligent ways that things can happen. So if we can do that to a city, like that would be incredible. But you asked another question and I slightly forgot it. One was, what would be the
Yeah, just kind of what was like, I guess, what does the fully conscious city look like in 2050, and what role does AI play in sustaining that?
And what role does AI play? Okay, yeah. So I mean, AI, it's the digital infrastructure. Like nothing is going to be created without AI. It just wouldn't make any sense. It would be too slow. I mean, before we had like, traditional code, and we had generative code, genetic code, now AI. I mean, there's no turning back, just because, it just wouldn't be very efficient, right? So yeah, everything that you have that has to do with data itself, so like managing, transferring, optimizing, moving, like anything that has to do with data is going to be done with AI. So the question is, what is the AI behind it, right? Because like, I mean, I use Grok for different things and OpenAI for different things. They have personalities, They've literally been modeled after their founders. It's like, if I need something like very concise and like research heavy, I'm like, Grok, give it to me. I need something that's like a little bit like more poetic and like understands even spirituality for some of these questions. OpenAI, Grok wouldn't even understand it, right? And that's also the problem of like creating like these, centralized like singular AIs that are potentially going to be able to like solve things for everyone, right? Because it just gives like a very specific perspective, right? So I think it's very important that whatever is going to be guiding these large, digital infrastructure, that's going to go from, managing, power resources to, coding your robots, like your in-house robot, to, your self-driving car. I mean, it's essentially everything, so it's very important how these AIs are built. Yeah.
And to close us off, what are some of your final thoughts that you would like to leave us with? I know you're going to be joining us for the panel, but what are some of the thoughts around compassion, right? And like, how do we actually integrate compassion into the things that we do, the designs that we make, the cities that we build? How does that actually play into the larger ecosystem?
Yeah, I think what's very important, and I'll say that like in parallel to compassion, is that we are all shaping this world. There isn't like the builders and the non-builders. If you are passive, you are passively shaping the world. You are a consumer, you're passively shaping it because you are the one that is building something. Otherwise, that product would not sustain, right? It would not exist if there weren't any consumers, right? So I think awareness of how everything that we do is shaping this system, shaping this world, shaping this experience at every level of what it exists is the first thing. And then through that awareness, comprehending that other people are in their process too, and that we would all want to have the most enjoyable time while we're alive. Like nobody wants to have a bad time here, right? So like let's just try to make it fun for everyone. Like why don't we just do that? I think there's just like a lot of resistance into thinking that we can't, or that for some reason because others didn't know, there's like these blockages. But in reality, we could just create something good. And if something good is then bought by a lot of people that want something good, then there you go. You got to, a product that works and that is backed and is scalable. So that's it. That's literally it. So like instead of, trying to like trick people into buying things that are unnecessary just for the sake of creating like a consumerist economy, based on like lower chakra desires, it's like, why don't we go to something higher and just like, start creating things that are like good for everyone. And I think compassion is the sense of like realizing that you and everyone else are just the same. Like we are all the same, and I would include animals and plants there too. Like we all here want to live and we all want to live the best life. So
Thank you for your talk. It was really informative, and I know there's so much more to actually discuss. And I look forward to collaborating with you in the future. Some of your ideas are, all your ideas are very needed in this space, not only in a Latin America context, but a global context. And so, just I encourage you to continue your work, and I'm sure you will. And ultimately, it's needed and it's valued. So I appreciate you, Pico, for joining us, and we appreciate your talk.
Well, thank you. We'll see you later.
Definitely. Wonderful. What an amazing, informative talk, on our built space, on our environment, but also how do we connect our individuality to the larger spaces of our environment. And so just to kind of continue that thought, one of the things that as a cyborg anthropologist, I really study and I start to look into is the opportunity around narratives. And I believe that, since humanity has been, first dreamed or understood what it is to actually be conscious, we've told stories, whether that be in a sense of oratory or film or books. We have all told stories, and I look at it in kind of this structure of that. Everything comes from a thought or an idea or a dream, right? And from that, we put that into words and in kind of a codified understanding of how do we actually express that of what we're thinking and what we're dreaming. And then we have this kind of, as humans, this ingenuity of actually taking that story, taking those words and manipulating the physical space in order to create a thing. Right. So, for example, a computer, right? It hasn't been designed without a thought, without somebody putting it into words what that computer looks like, and then manipulating different elements within our physical space in order to create that computer, right? Which expanded out into us connecting and living and socially being socially driven by, the aspects of what a computer can do. And so I just say that as the concept of storytelling is so important when we talk about how do we integrate compassion and how do we create, these different elements of understanding different perspectives and putting diverse aspects around the models that we create when it comes to AI. And so to bring in another lens on storytelling, creativity, and imagination, I want to kind of go into a fireside chat. And this fireside chat, I'll be joined by a gentleman by the name of Justin Breen. And it's so funny because we actually connected through another platform back in 2021. And when June put us in contact, we were like, oh, wait, hold on. We actually know each other. So it's just kind of a full circle moment for me on how we actually got reconnected. But it seems like that's how the world works, right? Is that you do the work, you go out and you kind of are these tentacles of the same ideas and you do your thing individually, but individually it comes back to the collective. And so Justin Breen, he's the co-founder of Corvia.ai and author of the best-selling book, Epic Life. Justin's career has consistently bridged entrepreneurship, media, and creativity, showing how powerful networks as well as narratives can transform not just businesses, but also lives. His upcoming book, Epic Journey, which features an introduction by Dr. Deepak Chopra and will be adapted into a documentary narrated by Gary Sinise. Explores how stories shape human flourishing and how imagination guides us into new futures. Justin has also been recognized globally for it, not only his imagination and his narrative abilities, but ultimately looking at um, how imagination guides us into new futures, right? So he's the co-founder and CEO of the Epic FIT Network, Fit Network, named one of the top 5 masterminds on the planet by Business Traveler USA. At the heart of his work is the belief that narratives are technologies in themselves, that they carry culture, they carry values, and possibilities across generations. With Corvia.ai, Justin is exploring this truth directly, really creating a platform that teaches people how to make music with AI. So through this, he is not only opening doors to creative expression, but also showing how technology, when designed with imagination and care, can amplify human potential. So in this fireside chat, we'll explore, and I'll explore with Justin, the power of story, creativity, and imagination in guiding AI with compassion, and how music, and particularly narrative and innovation, can help us dream into a more flourishing future. So I'd like to welcome Justin to the stage, and welcome.
That was a great intro. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Definitely, definitely. So maybe just to start off, Justin, as we get into this fireside chat, I want to ask you, kind of what led you to where you are now, and what are some of the things that you think of on a day-to-day basis when it comes to AI and compassion?
Well, I appreciate that question. Too, I had sent you an article a little before this if you want to post it so everyone can see it, just how I kind of observe things. And I actually don't do a lot of thinking, actually feel things. And then if I feel something is right, then I think about it. But basically everything comes from my heart, intuition first, and then my brain kicks in. And then have found most people think and use IQ and not necessarily their EQ or SQ, which is spiritual quotient, and then create things based on overthinking as opposed to feeling anything. And so you have government, finance, religion, the law, the economy, war, so it's due to overthinking and not so much feeling anything. So I think a lot of the problems would be solved if people actually felt things first and then did some thinking. Oh, thanks for posting that. And then real quick, I'll share this. I found that children are much smarter than adults usually, not always, usually, because they haven't been conditioned by society yet. So my 10-year-old, well, he's 11 now, but if you can see this, my 11-year-old son, Chase, drew this when he was 10. Can everyone see this? Hopefully, but so the previous 2 speakers, Valeria and Pico, they're the Mother Earth, source of life and reflection. I could hear it. I'm this grandfather, great spirit, just kind of floating around. And then the world needs the neutral moons as well. And then geometry, even though Chase spelled geometry wrong, and consciousness, but geometry unlocks consciousness. So those are the kinds of things I talk to my 2 sons about. And then we discuss these things. So I found that's a more interesting thing than talking about youth baseball or youth soccer, football on a consistent basis. But in terms of answering your question, how I got here, my father was 61 when I was born, and my mom was 27. And my father was a World War II hero, got down multiple times in combat, many times without a parachute, and would just get back into another plane. So that's my litmus test of that's just my litmus test. You either can do that or make an excuse. And then he met my mom after a drunk driver hit him in his late 50s. The drunk driver was killed instantly. My dad survived, broke essentially every bone in his body, but survived. And then he woke up, thought he was dead, and my mom was an angel, but my mom was his night nurse. So that's how they met, and that's why I'm here. So I don't believe in randomness, just think things are meant to be, and then was born with this story at that type of level. So most of my day is listening to and connecting with the top visionaries on the planet, or those who don't make excuses, and then spend 90% of my time just listening to them, and then create patterns or books or songs or articles based on what I've learned. So I don't really talk that much unless people ask me questions. I'd rather listen to what they have to say.
Definitely. Well, we didn't have to talk much in actually connecting on being a 6'2" manifester, so I totally get it. So you've built a career on stories, networks, as well as creativity, and now you're working at the intersection of music and AI. So to start us off, like let me ask you a question. Why do you think music is such a powerful force when paired with technology, specifically AI?
Well, great question. And then just as context background, I have no background in music, don't play any instruments, have very little background in AI, but always thought, even before I started using AI, that the main role of AI would be self-care. We've heard multiple discussions already about mental health, so I thought AI would be a fast track into your own heart, into own mental health. And then late last year, I started writing poems and then posting them online. One of my friends is a top music producer based in Nashville, and she's like, "Oh, hey, why don't we start writing songs?" I'm like, "Okay, sure." And then was at a Thanksgiving party, and people were talking about things that I wasn't interested in. So I was like, "Oh, is there a program where I can plug some of my lyrics into it, and then it could create a song?" And then found sunoai.ai, plugged one of my lyrics into it. It produced 2 versions, and the second one was, I mean, it was just absolutely beautiful. And so I'm like, "Oh, this would be interesting." And wound up talking to one of my friends who we both discovered that music is like a fast track into your own heart, into your own soul. Somehow the technology, the AI is able to do that. I don't know how it's able to do that, but it just does. And then we're like, "Oh, let's create a company based on that." And the company is called Corvia.ai. COR is heart. That's the Latin word for courage, heart. And then via is path. So Corvia means heart path. So we're excited to scale that. And basically, we teach people how to make songs with AI because we found that it's the best, quickest way to become your own artist and also create a path into your own heart very quickly. It's really fascinating.
I love that. That's beautiful. In this forum, we're talking a lot about AI and compassion, how technology can deepen human connection rather than strip it away, right? So
Yeah.
when you founded Corvia.ai, what inspired you to create a company around teaching people to make songs with AI? Was there a moment that clicked for you, or like kind of when was that moment where it was just like, yes, this is what we actually need?
Well, there were several. That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. The real moment, like, let's actually create a company out of this is I had written a song to myself, like my inner child, and then I sent it to my co-founder, Eric. And we're like, "Oh, this is a way to heal your own inner childhood trauma." And so we're like, and then he's a visionary like me, who again follows his heart and does very little overthinking. So we're like, "Oh, let's create a company based on this." So that was the main moment. And then the other thing, what we've learned from doing these workshops, and then me teaching people one-on-one or in workshops, is that 100% of the time, 100%, someone cries in it. And then 2, all they need to do is hear these songs and they're like, "Oh my God." So it's that powerful. And then 2 things from that. One, I write my own song lyrics very quickly. The other music company I have, my co-founder is one of Peter Gabriel's main producers. Peter Gabriel's most famous song is "In Your Eyes." And then he's taking some of the songs I've actually written and having humans make them, because we don't want to replace human musicians. We want to collaborate with them. AI, we don't want to have AI completely replace them. And then the second thing with that is that AI can very quickly, whether it's through ChatGPT or Corvia, it can easily create lyrics without you having to do that. So Corvia teaches people how to make lyrics and then turn it into music without you having to really do anything other than saying how you feel or talk about a particular moment in your life. So it's a multi-pronged approach that, again, you don't have to, spend weeks or months creating a song. You can spend 5 minutes just talking about how you feel, and then it spits out this beautiful artwork.
That's really brilliant. I guess, from your perspective, how do stories and narratives act as technologies in themselves, right? And how can they help guide AI toward, deeper human connection?
I never thought or felt that a story was its own technology, but that's a really profound way of looking at it. And that's why I'd rather listen and like to do these type of things, because you always learn something new. That's a really good way of looking at storytelling. It's its own technology. So that's what I'm going to be focused on right now. What you said, not even the question. That's how my heart and brain work. And what I found with storytelling is a couple of things. One, everyone has a story. I haven't met one person. It's funny because I've written 3 books, and then many times people are like, "Oh, I don't think I have a book in me," or "I don't think my life's worthy of a book." I always laugh because it's like, well, of course it is, but because it is, because everyone has a story. But then what I found is from talking to visionaries or people that are aspiring visionaries, there are only 4 things, because my brain turns everything into patterns, but there are only 4 things that separate visionaries or aspiring visionaries from everyone else. There are only 4 things. Only 4. So 1 is bankruptcy or potential bankruptcy, 2 is depression, 3 is the highest level of anxiety you can imagine, and then 4 is trauma as a child or young adult. So since COVID, not counting the silver spoons, I know a lot of silver spoons are folks that were born very wealthy, but not counting those, almost everyone I talk to, I'd say well over 90% of the people I talk to are all 4 of those. And then certainly everyone that I talk to now is at least 3 of those 4 things. I can't even remember the last time I talked to someone who's not a silver spoon that is less than 3 of those 4 things. So visionaries are, again, 3 or 4 of those things, and then they have the highest IQ, highest EQ. They have the best coping skills. The word cope means to fight, Latin word mean to fight, so they have the highest fighting skills. So they're able to overcome those 4 things with IQ and EQ and again, spiritual quotient as well. So that's really what separates visionaries from everyone else.
I love that. I love that answer. As we kind of expand on that kind of narratives as a technology, in this forum, we've talked a lot about the Japanese principles of wa, right, which is harmony, and the ma, which is reflection. And music embodies both of those things, right? Rhythm and silence, right? And so how do you see AI supporting harmony and reflection in the way that we create and connect?
Tremendous question. So again, with no background prior to this in music, other than playing the trumpet for like 3 weeks, and I was terrible at it in 4th grade, and then very little background in AI other than some very interesting entrepreneur groups where they're the top AI people in the world, and I listened to them. What I found with music specifically, after feeling it, is that music, and I know you as an anthropologist, you'll appreciate this, but music actually predates the spoken word by around 10,000 years. So the first spoken language they've determined is about 50,000 years ago in Africa. And then the current instrument that they found dates back 60,000 years ago. It was a cave bear bone with 4 holes drilled in it. So it's like a flute. And they found it in a cave, which is, I believe, in what's now Croatia. So music is our original communication method. It's how we used to communicate exclusively before spoken word. And so that's like the IQ answer to that. The EQ is music somehow, like, I'll give you an example like this. And I talked to a lot of top musicians and songwriters in the world, and exclusively they say they just can kind of feel these lyrics. And it's the same when I write songs too. you can just feel it in the ether. I write songs in 5 minutes. Like I can hear the lyrics, or I just feel them and then spit it out. And so it comes from a place that is beyond logic. It's beyond IQ. And I can't explain that other than it just comes into my heart. And again, talking to, top musicians in the world, that's where it comes from. And it was a really interesting thing. One of my good friends who's a collaborator with Corvia, he's Aerosmith, the band Aerosmith. For those that don't know, it's a very famous rock band. But he was their longtime manager and helped them with the Pump tour. Pump is one of their most famous albums. And so I was sending him some of my songs, and he's like, "Oh, it's so great, it's so great that you can produce these songs so quickly." I'm like, "Oh, thanks." And I'm like, "Well, so how come sometimes top artists or whatever, they struggle to do that?" And he goes, "Oh, well, you need to understand something. So if it's coming purely from a place from your heart, then it's easy to do it. But then what happens with a lot of these groups and, just things in general is money becomes involved, or you're told you have to write this song this way or do it this way or write on this topic. And then your heart and your soul are taken away from it and it becomes a commodity. And then it takes months, if not years, to do some of these songs. So it was a really interesting thing to hear what happens if that EQ is overtaken by the overthinking or the IQ. And that's really always stuck with me. And so that's why music is so important in its pure raw form, is it comes from a place that's beyond IQ or beyond what is in this material world.
That's so profound. That's so profound. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, and we're talking about compassion and we're talking about kind of where we are now. But I want to ask you a little bit more about where do you see AI going in the future, right? Particularly in a positive direction. So what do you think will be its main contributors or contributions per se to the human flourishing when it comes to AI and narratives and music?
Yeah, thanks for asking that. I'll answer it like this. So, my next book, purely manifested. I take no credit for it. It came from a higher power, but essentially, it's about the rise of the divine feminine. And I never thought I'd be writing a book about the rise of the divine feminine. I didn't even know what that meant when I was writing it. It's the alchemist and or little prince, but real, essentially deconstructed / destroyed my previous life to write it. Most people won't do that and do the internal work. And what I've learned over the last 18 months after starting to write that book, and then we heard it from our last two presenters, is that the world must embrace more of feminine leadership, regardless of gender. But essentially, the world is being controlled by masculine ego, whether it's finance, politics. You can hear it when women say they're fighting to get a seat at the table. So that's any vertical. And so with AI and any vertical, but specifically AI and then music, because you asked, it's essential that more women and more of the divine feminine have a seat at that table. And I strongly feel that's where we're headed towards society for sure. It cannot continue in this way. It's not sustainable. It's not, with too much of the masculine ego. Yeah, you see what happens when that becomes involved. So that's where music comes into play as well. Is it for men specifically as well? It really helps embrace your divine feminine, which is like intuition and heart and creativity. And again, I never thought I'd be talking about this or writing about. I never thought that, but that's kind of what happens in life. Is you learn things and then you learn from obstacles or those 4 things, and then you create something out of it.
Definitely. And my job as a curator is really to kind of tie and weave in, what it
Yeah.
means in a Latin American sense, right? So as we were talking about indigenous protocols throughout this segment, we're really talking about frameworks for living, right? So ways of making decisions that honor balance, respect, also as well as collective care. And music has always carried those same qualities, right? So, how do you see the work of what you're doing with AI and music as being in the conversation with these deeper protocols, right? Of awareness, of honoring one another, as engaging in the design of compassion? Because it's like you can make a song with frequencies that has a very negative connotation, that has a very negative aspect on your energy and your spiritual soul, right? Or you can make music that actually uplifts and actually creates and designs in a fractal type of manifestation that actually develops something deeper and more meaningful. So maybe just talk about how indigenous protocols, can make that bridge between what's important in music and how we see that in the future.
It's great. Whether you're walking in a rainforest, where I live, I go to Lake Michigan's the closest big lake, which is a very large lake. So I walk to the beach quite a bit and walk around the forest preserves as well. So it's embracing that nature. But yeah, again, if you look at the music industry, and I don't have the percentages in front of me, but I mean, you just listen to the lyrics and listen to entire, song genres, it's extremely negative and violent in many of those things. And again, like I see it from a firsthand perspective because my sons who are 11 and 12, they listen to a lot of those songs and how negative they are. So, and again, the music industry, like most industries, are controlled by the masculine. So that's the most important thing is again, and it's a challenge too. It's a challenge too, but embracing that divine feminine, have more women leadership and have more women leadership. But, just really overseeing what is happening in the world. It's a really fascinating thing seeing how childhood trauma affects both men and women at a cellular level. And then it's overcoming generation upon generation of institutional trauma. So I think that's where music really can help bridge that gap into looking into your own self-care and then analyzing, your childhood or your parents or you trying to be a parent or a difficult job situation or what's going on in the world. Like it's such a wonderful, beautiful way of simply yet powerfully creating something that can heal your own heart. And then to really look at things like, and what the book is about is that the world's just a giant collective broken heart by people that have broken hearts. So it's individual broken hearts, not doing self-care, and then creating masks that just project broken hearts. And then so I just like you're a curator. I just curate that. And then if you're not a litmus test for the people you serve, that's hypocrisy. So I've done the deep healing inner work and then created things that hopefully help people also do the deep inner healing work. And music I found is, if not the best one, certainly one of the best things and best ways of doing that.
I love that. I love that. So as we round off this fireside chat before we kind of get into opening up the panel, I want to ask you one more question, and so, if we think of technology as carrying a kind of memory, right? Much like songs or stories do. What do you believe AI should remember from us as humanity? And what should it never forget? If we want it to truly serve compassion and flourishing, what are some of those things?
What should AI remember? I feel it like from this perspective, like you are NFL high level football player. I was at a Notre Dame game the other day. Great atmosphere, but I was talking to the woman I was with. I was like, 100 years from now, they're gonna be like, how did they allow people to do this? Like, there's no way this can continue. People just literally concussing PTSD. Like they're just like, how are they allowing this? I mean, obviously it's because of money. I understand that, but like, so like 100 years from now, we're gonna remember like they actually allowed people to do this to themselves. I can't imagine the NFL is gonna be around 100 years from now. So it's from that context that I look at AI. I look at it and it's like, because we're at the forefront of like what this is actually going to do. Like it can certainly go down the dark path of the high IQ, no EQ, pure narcissistic, let's make money at any cost. It could go down that route, or it could go down the route of the heart-led, like let's actually change the world and help people. Oh, and perhaps make money doing it. I've tried to care about material things. I just don't. For those that know what it is, I'm a life path 11. That's numerology. Never knew anything about numerology 18 months ago, but you go down this path, that's what happens. But 11s are the most spiritual. They don't care about material things at all. They try to, but you might want to look up numerology. But that's where we're at with AI right now. It's a very exciting time. I'm fully abundant no matter what. So I have full faith, and certainly from hearing the presenters today, that there are enough great high EQ leaders that will help steer AI into the right direction.
Thank you for that. This was a most enjoyable fireside chat, and I really look forward to having and continuing these conversations. And as I heard you speak, and I started to kind of piece things together. AI, just as music, is a tool, right? It is a tool that we can actually utilize and produce in order to create something. Now, how we use that tool solely depends on how we approach it and how we design and our inner beings, right, as humans. And so, like, as we upgrade these design systems, from a technological aspect, we also need to actually upgrade the human aspect of our human operating system, right? So we are at a level where we are exuding and conspiring to create and design things that are meaningful, that are in harmony, that have the right spaces in between the notes that actually create that symphony, right? And so, it's my hope that there's enough people doing the work that have enough compassionate hearts to actually heal those broken hearts that you were talking about, right? That we can actually start to look at this opportunity in this space and time to actually understand how AI can be a tool of reconnecting, be a tool of resonance and resiliency, of compassion that brings us back into a space of connection between humans and planet and society. So thank you, Justin, for that. I look forward, and I guess you can stay here because we're going to transition into our final segment, which is our panel talk. So I'd like to invite Pico as well as Valeria back up to the stage. And I just want to kind of guide some questions on, how do we start to tie some of these things together. So, through my work, as a cyborg anthropologist, or even just, from my first career of being in football, I've always wanted to work at a historical aspect, a current aspect, and a future aspect. And so that ancestral aspect, or that past aspect, is really designed around ancestral wisdom, right? What can we learn from the past? What can we learn from the people that have come before us? What can we learn from situations? Instead of making the same mistakes over and over and over again, how do we understand that there is wisdom deeply embedded into the way that we have lived for thousands and thousands of years in the past? And then we have this great opportunity right now, currently in the future, where we have access to tools that allow us to expand our own human capabilities, right? Whether it be the cell phone, or whether it be the internet, whether it be the car, the airplane, we're able to move in a way that we may have not have been able to move at any time in history. But then again, there's also signs that we might have had higher technologies in the past than we do now. But let's just say, for the sake of what we do know, is that we have an opportunity to combine modern technologies with a wisdom that we've been able to codify for the past thousands of years, and then look at what type of futures we want to build in the future. What type of societies do we want to live in? How do we want to integrate compassion and care into the things that we do? And so, as I open up kind of this last segment, I want to ask a question to us all. And that question is, how can Latin America's ancestral traditions and governance protocols influence the design of trustworthy AI globally, not only in a Latin American context, but also globally? So what are some of those thoughts around that? How can Latin America's ancestral traditions and governance protocols really influence the design of trustworthy AI globally?
Well, there's a part that I find extremely important. First of all, before how they can influence, is how can they participate? How can they even exist in the data and how it's being used? Because since this is a statistical model, statistically, they are the minority. Statistically, there's very few of them, and statistically, they don't have access to usually that much technology or that much education in these things, yet they are extremely well educated on regenerative ecosystems and nature and cohabitation. But if they don't even exist in the data, how will AI, like, how can you make it more relevant and coexist with it? And that I put that forward to begin with.
So what do you think, Pico? You being from Latin America, but also a global leader, how do you see like some of the traditions or some of the ancestral wisdom that is embedded in like the communities of Latin America? How can that actually be, integrated in designing trustworthy AI global systems, when we're talking about that? Valeria, talked about participation and data, and the inclusion of those protocols into data. What is some of your perspectives on that?
Yeah, and I think this goes not only for like Latin American indigenous traditions, but in general, any type of I mean, whether it's like indigenous cultures or religions. And I don't want to like oversimplify, but I think at the core base of it all, it's the same, ethical spine, right? Like, whatever is like the overlapping religions or like your original cultures or whatever, there's this there's the center that has to do with the connection to the self, the connection to others, the connection to the planet, the connection to God, right? And how all these happen simultaneously, and anything that deviates from that, from like that sense of oneness and unity of everything, is what we call the illusion or the Maya, or the part that is not necessarily like the real reality, but what we're living in as like the dream or the illusory reality, which is the illusion of separation. So I think if we are able to compile, let's say, not only from like one single religion, but just like, the overlapping of like all these different cultures around the world, and find, what that core is, I think that will give us, a lot of insight of what it is that, that we are potentially like aiming for as a society, or as a more than a society. I think it comes like to the specs of like enlightenment, and the sense of enlightenment is like, not only like the non-attachment, but also, the unification of everything, and that, puts the basis of like equality, inclusion, dignity, like all these things, right? So yeah, I think it's super important. Yeah, so hopefully it's done correctly and with a lot of respect, and being able to like also like I think some of the things that we're talking about, like being able to withhold the diversity within the inclusion, right? So it's like, we're all, we're all included, we're all here, on the same mission of life, and the purpose of of trespassing this life, through our own personal experience, but we are all having a different perspective. Like I think Vale said, in a way, like we were dealt with different cards, right? So we are coming from like a slightly different shade, or like a different a different side of how consciousness is observing itself from like a different angle. So I think it's important to like also respect that, and be able to like thrive through that diversity as well.
I love that. Justin, I guess, as we kind of look at like what is available to us right now, for you and also for the rest of the panel, what would it look like for AI economies to regenerate communities and environments, right? And instead of extracting from them, what does it look like for those economies to really develop those regenerative aspects, right? Because I guess the whole thing of resiliency is to regenerate and to replenish and to actually leave more than what you actually have taken. Do you have any ideas on that? And then I would love to like move around the room with that same question. What does that look like for the youth? What does that look like for city planning? What does that look like for, music generation? How do we actually start to look at those types of aspects?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for asking that. Thea, I put it in the chat, or if someone wants to, so everyone can see it, but so I did a chart and then kind of like a step-by-step thing of like consciousness and scale of consciousness. So combined Dr. David Hawkins, who spent his whole, adult life working on the scale of consciousness, and then Young, and then Robert Johnson, who did a lot of work on shadow work. So combined all of that into like a scale of consciousness, shadow work, philosophical thing. And then I found it's a really interesting perspective of going through this and then realizing, to answer your question, like most of the world is below 200.
Feel free to ask.
Oh, most of the world is below 200 on the scale of consciousness. So 200 is courage, goes up to 1,000, by the way. So they don't get to the heart part of things. So that's why you see economy based on fear or shame or anger or apathy, because that's where most of the world is. And then only 1% gets to 500, which is inner heart, inner belief. So you're basically currently, and again, I'm fully in belief that things will change, but currently you're dealing with most of the world that is extremely low on the scale of consciousness, and it's in survival mode, which is okay and totally understandable. And so the key is for economy or using AI is to have enough folks that have that high enough scale of consciousness that they can impact everyone else. And I believe, Pico, you were hanging out with the Dalai Lama and people like that. So you have one Dalai Lama who can impact, millions, if not billions of people with his scale of consciousness. I like to partner with people like Dr. Deepak Chopra or Gary Sinise or, people like that. I mean, which is fine, but it's because their scale of consciousness is so high that it allows the work to help more people. So I think that's the key to it. And again, it's like doing the chakra work. Like most people don't talk about that, which is okay. But like I'm seventh chakra, by the way. I'm just floating around. It's all like that type of thing. So when you're doing that type of work and to go through the pain of doing that, I think that's where true transformation changes, and that's where you'll see things like the economy start to turn around.
Pico, did you have any thoughts on that? I know that you're deeply rooted into the community and environment. What are some of your thoughts?
For regenerative economies specifically, or
Yeah, for regenerative economy.
for chakras and Hawkins scale. I'll actually touch upon that one. I think that one's more interesting.
Go for it. Go for it.
So,
Interesting.
I think, yeah, I mean, whether whether we use that scale precisely or something different, because at the end, scales or anything that we measure is a measurement done by a human, so it's like coming from like a human perspective of measuring something that's like very comprehensive to be able to quantify. But let's say Hawkins is like as close to something that I think is like pretty spot on. He does put peace above enlightenment or something like that, or like I think there's like one that I was like, oh, I didn't realize that that could be that way. But I think one thing to remember is or to realize is that the world is a reflection of ourselves, right? So there is no such thing as the others are in a lower state of consciousness and I'm not, right? And I think that's an important differentiation to do. And it's that, we're not, there is no hero here, there is no one that's going to be like, the world is evil and I'm here to save it. No, that's not how it works. So the moment that we realize that everything that we see, everything that we perceive is a direct reflection of the energy or the state of consciousness that we're at, what it is just showing us what we are. And then through that, through that acknowledgement and that acceptance comes transformation, right? So the moment that we can transform ourselves, then the external world also, changes with us. So whether we end up going into like the dystopic reality or the utopic reality of what AI is, the IQ versus the EQ, the way that Justin was presenting it, it has a lot to do with how we are transforming ourselves as well, right? Because you are literally the state, like the way that I've perceived it, because I've been like I guess like playing around with consciousness quite a bit. That's what happens when you do like a lot of like trips with the Dalai Lama. No, I'm kidding. Or a lot of ayahuasca, maybe all of those things combined. But essentially, it's like when you're in the central point of like yourself, that is your perception of consciousness, right? Like you are the soul that is perceiving through the sensory body, through the self, right? So through this point, everything that you are perceiving is you, including everything that is outside of you is a version of you, right? And that happens for everyone. It's like a Voronoi diagram. And then what is encapsulating everyone is a higher soul that has all of us combined, essentially. And then there's higher souls of everything until it's the Brahma, the everything of everything, right? So I think the moment that you realize that you are the consciousness that is perceiving and therefore creating what you perceive, because you can only perceive what's in resonance with yourself, then choosing what you are is the most important thing that you can do. Because every time that you choose to go deeper and to actually be at that higher state, then you actually end up, connecting, resonating, creating, therefore, the reality that you want to live in. And I think that's kind of like the game, because at the beginning of that awakening, you still feel like you are a self, like an individual self inside of a world, and that's kind of like, you're this character, right? And then you see yourself as separate from the world, right? And that's also like very confusing. But then when you realize that it's not, it actually kind of starts dancing with you, right? Because you change, it changes, and you just become like super aware of it. And that's literally what consciousness is doing consistently. It is just like changing and observing how everything changes. Yeah. So I don't know if that's talking about like regenerative economies, but when it comes to regenerative economies,
I really love that. Because it reminds me of like Maslow, right? Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and how,
Mm,
right, he proposed a model of human motivation, structured as a pyramid, right? Like the psychological needs, food, water,
mm.
shelter, safety, security, health, stability,
I was
love, and belonging.
about to say
Right? Go ahead, Valeria.
biodynamics. So I was
Yeah.
about to talk about
Well, you
biodynamics. Like there's different visions and theories, like in religions, like I don't know, metaphors to synthesize something that's very abstract. But essentially it's a little bit above our pay grade to like fully understand. Oh. Hi, OpenAI. Um No, I was literally thinking about spiral dynamics, and I even like looked it up on the side of my screen to like remember it. And it's kind of like how we inhabit like different latitudes of consciousness and how it's all collective. And lately, what has been like my focus of like, I don't know, fascination is a metaphor that we've adopted for AI with black holes. So when I was young, I used to be obsessed with black holes, and I thought that the physics behind them was crazy. So like when Interstellar came out, I'm like, oh my gosh, is this, could this like have any resonance or be any true? And I've always said, you know, like AI came into society, came into the world like a black hole absorbing all human data that it can, all of it, you know, as much as it can, it will feed upon it. And then the way that we're describing the future is that we're nearing a singularity. And the singularity is just a metaphor, and no one really can agree on what the singularity means. But it's basically just the accelerated pace of development of technologies and changes and merging with AI. And this is called the singularity, again, coming back into the metaphor of black holes. So I don't know exactly how to tie that, like these really like high level, I don't know, like consciousness, like future foresight into technology, because it feels like every time we talk about AI, we begin with the technology instead of the people. But actually, every time you try to do anything with AI or like use it to transform organizations, it's always you have to start with the culture first, their mindset towards it, their fears, like all the sociological like dilemmas that come with that culture shift. So we always are like, I don't know, do we start with the technology? Do we start with the people? Are they going in parallel? And like Pico says, it kind of goes like as we evolve as humans and we gain like this like planetary level of consciousness, then like we need AI to evolve with us at that same pace. Or there will be like an equivalent AI for like all these like latitudes, and then we will just have to be like dealing with that. I don't know.
Mhm. No, that's a very interesting concept, and I think about this all the time in my work. So the whole aspect of being a cyborg anthropologist is really piggybacked off of quantum mechanics, right, and quantum theory. And Niels Bohr, he had a very, the double slit experiment where he observed that a neutron could actually be a wave as well as a particle at the same time, right? So an atom or electron could actually be shot, and then it could actually be observed as a layered reflection of waves or a particle. But what a lot of people didn't consider is that in that experiment, Niels was also the observer. So he's part of the apparatus, right? So as the observer, you become part of the whole system, which actually indicates if it's either a particle or a wave, right? So there is no separation between individual and collective, right? There's no separation between what I observe and what is actually being observed. And so what cyborg anthropology does is that it breaks down the boundaries between us and it, that as we are creating technology, technology is also creating us. So it's not a just kind of a one linear way, unilateral decision that we are making, that ultimately once we start creating this technology, that, hey, we can stand here on the sideline and just watch technology be built with every idea, with every innovation, with every design, with every, compassionate or non-compassionate, integration of what we design. That is going to be an understanding of how, and a reflection of what we actually create. And so, that kind of goes into like this Maslow, this Western part of thinking, where it's like really surfaced around the individual, right? Where in indigenous protocols, a lot of it is actually surfaced around wholeness, or the circle, or the web, or this kind of, interstellar, like you were talking about, the black hole of like the all consumption of everything, right? Where each element, like food, safety, belonging, purpose, and spirituality of what Maslow was talking about, is interwoven. If one thread breaks, the whole is affected, right? There is no kind of just like piecing one here and one there. And I think, Pico, you spoke about it in your thing. As one thing is actually changed or moved, another thing is actually shifted. And so community at the center, rather than the individual at the center, takes us from the I to the we, right? It takes us from the individual to the murmuration of birds, where like every bird is an individual, but you get this flow of fluidity, of movement as we move around space and time. So I love this conversation of where it's going. Pico, I think you wanted to chime in a little bit, or maybe not, but you know, Justin, anybody, you know, is open to just kind of like understanding or giving some insights on this.
In like in terms of like going back to like ancestral and indigenous cultures, this is, I don't know, like one of the things that I want to do in my time as hub leader. I'm not exactly sure how, but there's definitely interest in collaborating with indigenous communities in Colombia. And we've been talking with one of the industry leaders that also feels very passionately about this. And we were talking about this whole notion of ancestrality and how, you know, it begins with the indigenous communities and the grandfather or the taita, or, you know, this one person that is really wise that everyone goes to for advice, for wisdom. How could we, with technology, make that ritual of communion and like closeness to something that feels so far away from like modern life more accessible, right? So how could you ask a taita in the Sierra Nevada like what he thinks about whatever, right? And how could we do this in the most like respectful, inclusive way possible? And then from there, it's like, well, you know, I want to know what he has to say about it, but I can also imagine myself, and whenever I have kids, I would love my kids to meet their grandparents and to get to know them as well as I did. So it's like, well, you know, there's like this ancestral part of like indigenous, but also ancestry in our own families. And this desire to connect with heritage, with culture, like, hey, I would have loved to know what my great grandparents were like. That is not possible. Everyone has forgotten about it. Everyone forgot their personalities or how it is that everything came to be. But with AI, with this whole notion of afterlife, with the whole of like what we could accomplish, like uploading our consciousness, our memories, our, I don't know, like whatever can be expressed in words, like that will be available. But everything that is more affective and relational and spiritual or intuitive, that will be a lot harder to put into the code. But basically, not a lot of people care about indigenous communities unless like you really like studied it in college or had some sort of like closeness to it, and like no one understands like why they should care. Like in Colombia, even saying that you look indigenous or that you're indigenous, it's like an offense. So we're not past that yet.
I love
But
that.
I think
And
there's like some sort of
go
antidote
ahead.
in the way that they.
Indeed. Go ahead, Justin.
Tremendous. I'll add to that from a perspective. When I was I guess an employee or had jobs, my favorite job was executive editor at the Rapid City Journal in South Dakota near Mount Rushmore. And then that's very close to Pine Ridge Reservation. And to simplify that, like the most beautiful land and then the most extreme poverty. So you have this incredible, just beautiful, magical land, and then the most extreme poverty, like 90% alcoholism, like no one has a job. And if you want to use the word indigenous there, or Native American, and then very few people know that, you know, the US Constitution was taken from the Iroquois Constitution. So the US Constitution framework is based on Native American Constitution. So not only took the land from indigenous Native Americans, but also their philosophy, and then tried to bury that. So that's happening in Colombia, not even talking about it. It's the same thing in America or First Nations with Canada. You know, it's the same thing. And then in regards to that and looking at things from beyond living body perspective, like I believe there are two deaths. One is living body death, which I'm not necessarily worried about. More importantly, I think it's creating something that that outlasts living body death, something that extends into the human consciousness. So I look at people that have created those type of things that have far surpassed their lives. And then one quick story on that is in the inventor of kindergarten, who's based in what is now Germany. Kindergarten was actually banned by the Prussian government because it violated the church. It was too extreme because kids were having too much fun. So a couple years before the inventor of kindergarten died, they banned kindergarten. And so he wrote a letter to the Prussian government begging for kindergarten to be reinstated. And then, of course, it was. And then one of that person's great grandchildren runs one of the kindergarten schools that he originally founded. So that's the way I kind of look at life from that perspective. And then again, children I found are smarter than adults because they haven't been conditioned yet. But my son Chase, when he was 9, we were talking about life and bending time, and then he considers life one long great day. So there's no like yesterday or tomorrow or years. Like those are all human constructs. So he was like, he said he was telling me there are only two ways to have a great long day. One is do what you have to do and what you're good at. And keep getting better at it. And two is create living things. So that could be a human child, that could create the foundation, a company. So that's really it. So that's kind of how I look at life, is one long great day.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We're actually coming to a close. We have about 4 minutes left. So, I appreciate not only you guys for stepping in and actually, giving your perspectives on this. But before we head out, I'd love for each of you just to kind of give one last, point of, how do you feel, what are some of your insights? What are things that you might want people to get involved with? And ultimately, how do we, just continue to derive compassion into our everyday lives and the things that we're building? So I'll start off with you, Valeria, and then we'll just work our way around.
All right. I don't know. I was telling Pico that I really enjoy these conversations that go beyond, I guess, technology first approach and dive deeper into human values and the kind of future that we want to build. And there's so much work for us to do here in Latin America, but I'm trying to grasp how can we approach this, like leaving behind this logic of competition and catching up, and actually appropriating it into something that is much more grounded in who we are, our values, our culture, and how we can, I don't know, expand this like abundance to as many people as we can. Because it feels like there's like this window that's closing. I honestly feel like there's a time ticking bomb on top of me, and it gives me a bit of anxiety, but it also makes me hustle very hard. So yeah, thank you, Marcus, for organizing this segment.
And thank you for participating. It's been quite valuable. Pico.
Yeah, I'll add on to what Valeria is saying, that whether there's a ticking box or not, that we should all participate. Like, it is our future. It is our lives. Like, we should get involved in whatever way we can. It doesn't mean that everyone has to get into AI and technology. We come with different purposes, with different desires, with different interests, with just different skill sets, etc. But it's more about, being active as much as you want, but also feeling that whatever you want to participate, you have the capability, the possibility to do so, right? So I think, there's so many different ways in being able to support the ecosystem, whether it's at the end node or at the core node or at the no node, it doesn't matter where it is. But I think, the more we are, collaboratively working towards a positive future, the cooler it'll be. So, yeah. And when it comes to like Latin American ones, Valeria, I think she already mentioned, but she has two really incredible hubs in Latin America, one of women in AI and the other one for AI for good. And yeah, we would love to also help other hubs or other people that are working in this space to see how we can empower them or support them in any way.
And Fico, thanks for being a mentor for me and for the hub. I truly.
I love that. Justin, any closing remarks?
Conscious conversations convert to capital, community, and collaboration. That's it.
Short and sweet. I love it. So as we come to the end of this Latin America segment, I want to pause in gratitude for the knowledge carried in this space, for the ancestors whose resilience makes our gathering possible, and for the generations yet to come who will inherit what we choose to create today. One thing that stands out to me is how every perspective shared really carried both memory and foresight. Our speakers reminded us that technology is not just about the future, it is also about how we honor the past. AI can encode erasure, or it can encode remembrance. It can widen divides, or it can weave continuity across generations. And Latin America teaches us that creativity has always been an act of survival. From music and art to language and governance, imagination has been the way communities resisted, endured, and redefined possibility. And in that same spirit, I think we must approach AI not as a natural or a neutral tool, but as a cultural force that will carry the stories we allow it to carry. So my invitation is this, really, let's leave here committed not just to innovation, but to imaginative responsibility, to really crafting those systems and designing those technologies that ensure our descendants inherit not only data and algorithms, but a world that's more compassionate, more equitable, and more alive. So I want to say thank you to all of the speakers. I want to thank you to the host, June and Chris, and all of the moderators and the people in the background that you may not see that have done so much work in this area to put this on. It's needed now more than ever. And, and may we carry forward the courage to dream, the discipline to build, and the humility to remember, all in light of compassion. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Deepu, and I want to thank my team, Valeria, Pico, Justin. Once again, thank you so much for your time and your insights on this.
It was amazing, Marcus. It was amazing because we started from Osaka, Japan, to India, to GCC, to Europe, to Africa, and now to South America. And then you have set a new benchmark to ahead. And then it was amazingly curated, well structured, and hats off to the complete team. Yeah. And it is just like Latin American short passes and all those things that is you were passing. It is just like watching a football match. It is like really, it was an art. That is how you handle this.
Appreciate
Really
it. Thank you, people. I couldn't have did it without the team. Our team is brilliant, and it was so last minute. We just called some people up. Valeria put us in contact. Justin, June, yourself. There's so much work to do in this. I'm glad that we were able to deliver something that.
From chaos to clarity, that is everything happened just for a reason. And with AI+Compassion, what we are trying to do is to connect the like-minded people across the globe coming together. And this is just a beginning. This just we started the conversation, and we have to move forward and have a continuity on this thing. And for sure, we'll be connecting again and taking whatever we have discussed forward.
And perhaps we can create a formal group around it, like a post-event group around it. That would be count me in.
Sure, we will do that. Yeah.
Yes.
And then it should be an action network that is we should be doing. That is whatever we are talking, that is we have to have steps to take forward. And also we are connected across the globe today, right? It is not just like some voices at some corners of the world. Right now we are connected. And then when the world is heading or traveling towards AI technology and profit, there is there is another side, that is another team that has to come who are asking, like, we have to look for humanity, we have to look for nature, and then all those things should go in harmony. And
Yeah.
which team you belongs to, that is the question. And I think that is, we have a strong team today. Great. Yeah.